We all started somewhere, we all came from somewhere. And in the case of the big three toys of the 1980s in the action figure market that was targeted at boys, we had Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Masters of the Universe. Three toy lines that I've talked about quite often on this channel when considering the extended history of toys and the action figure genre in general. Now, of course, these toys, we know them in their popular form, but it kind of begs the question as well of where did they come from? How did they get started? Were they conceived as is? We know the answer is no, and they sort of evolved into the way they became as they became popularized through the Saturday morning cartoon era. Now, I know it's kind of the start of the World Cup right now, so I probably should have budgeted and allocated my time a little better and a little bit more efficiently, because I think I had a few friends basically say, hey, I'm watching the World Cup this morning, I'll catch you in a bit. And I'm like, oh, right. And I'd already scheduled this a number of days ago. And our good friend Phil from the Treasures for Trigger YouTube channel did a World Cup sweepstakes of sorts yesterday. I only got to pop into his chat very briefly to say hello and watch not quite all of it, but I watched about half of it this morning before this stream, and as I was getting ready in the background. Apparently, I've got the country of Ghana as my team, so I'm not sure how good they're gonna do or how far it'll go. But hey, that's okay. You'll probably notice that I'm solo missioning this stream for now, and that's the way it's going to be for the first 45 minutes or so. I have notified some people, namely the Patreon supporters of Toy Connections and the channel members of Toy Connections, that if they want to pop on the stream at 45 minutes after, so at 10:15 a.m. or 1:15 p.m. Eastern time, they can pop in and we can kind of do an open mic session. But again, that was me without me giving regards for the fact the World Cup is actually on right now. So we might have sorry, a bunch of people may have to catch this on the replay, and that's okay. Just gonna sip a coffee this morning. If I seem a little tired, it's a good kind of tired. I was at a toy show pretty much all day yesterday, and that toy show ran from 9:30 in the morning till 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I had to take a little bit of extra time to set up in the morning. So, well, all of us did. You need to set up before a toy show if you have a booth. And what happened there, though, is, of course, it starts at 9:30 in the morning, which means you probably got to be there for 8 in the morning if you're going to start setting up. And then you need to drive out there. And it wasn't a short drive for me, but it wasn't a super long drive. And between breakfast and everything, I was up closer to 6:30 yesterday morning. So that took until 3 in the afternoon. We kind of tore down. And then I ended up driving back into the municipality that I live in, and the AEW, or All Elite Wrestling Full Gear pay-per-view, was on last night, which was, in my mind, it was a pretty fantastic pay-per-view. I had a really good time with it. And the thing is, as fun as it was, I needed extra caffeine to stay awake throughout the day, because I just wasn't home for the entire day, literally. And the pay-per-view ran till about 9 p.m. in the evening. Then I went home with a full carload of toys. And when you go home with a full carload of toys because you've been vending at a toy show, you end up sort of needing time to pack it up, put it away. I quickly helped put my son to bed. I normally do the whole bedtime routine with him, but yesterday was a bit of an abbreviated process for me, because I was, pretty tired, coming in sweaty throughout the day. And I showed part of my haul on Instagram there, which I managed to get the 1983 G.I. Joe headquarters in the box from a vendor that was out there. Sorry, just taking care of the lighting. And man, I've had that headquarters before, and it's an okay set. In fact, no, I shouldn't say that. I should say it's a really good set. Now, with the box, though, the box art just did it for me. And also managed to pick up, as I was on my way out the door, a Brazil Estrela figure known as Urzor from their Forcafera line. So it's a bit of a rare find. He came with a tan bear as his animal, and he came with a purple version of this common gun that we often saw in the original 82 to 94 line. But I mean, obviously that's not why those of you who are here who've made it and aren't watching the World Cup, or you're in between World Cup breaks, you know, I really should check when exactly the World Cup started, because I bet it started right now. I bet the minute I hit live is when the opening kickoff was. So I guess the joke's on me. But while you're here, we're here to talk about the big three toys of the 1980s and where they started, where we ended up today, but ultimately a bit of an origin tale of a discussion. Now, when it comes to something like this in particular, I do not consider myself a subject matter expert in all of the toy lines we're going to talk about today. I mean, yes, we know, at least as I was growing up, and many of my peers and many of you who watch the channel, we know G.I. Joe as a real American hero. We know it as a 3 3/4 inch O-ring line that pitted, you know, the military themed G.I. Joe versus the terrorist organization of Cobra. But obviously it started as a 12-inch movable fighting man in the 1960s and evolved into an adventure team era and an Action Joe era. And well, in fact, it had a 14-year run, so it actually lasted longer than the real American hero that many of us saw in the highly commercialized, highly public, and Saturday morning cartoon and Marvel Comics era of G.I. Joe. So while I felt that the explosion of a real American hero was more widespread and more felt across the globe, the 12-inch G.I. Joe was the one that actually had a longer tenure on store shelves. Now, on that same note, but coming a bit later, G1 Transformers, we know them for what they are. We know them from the Sunbow cartoon, the Marvel Comics, the eventual movie, the toy line that was dominant on shelves starting in 1984. But the Diaclone line that preceded Transformers, was started in 1980, and the Car Robots series and the Jet Robo that was a companion series to it began in 1982. So it came just a couple of years before Transformers, and that's where I guess Hasbro and Takara sort of relicensed it to be used as Transformers. And then Microchange, or New Microman Microchange, was kind of a companion line to Takara. Like, they had that same transformation sequence or that same transformation gimmick associated with it. And of course, as some of us know, the Microchange line was based on like household and handheld type of gear and equipment. So anything from Walkmans to microscopes to handguns. And they kind of mishmashed those two lines together of Diaclone and Microchange to get the Transformers toy line to become what it is eventually today. I don't know if any of you can hear my son. He's kind of howling in the background. I've got one door closed and the other door is like 90% closed. I don't know if you can hear him or not, but if you can and he's being distracting, I'll go let him know to pipe down a little bit, because he's watching TV, so he doesn't need to be, wailing. And no, he's not watching the World Cup, so it's not like he's cheering for a team. Now, on the same note of what I was talking about a moment ago, Masters of the Universe, largely original stuff at its time. Yes, it's Conan inspired. Yes, it's known that Mark Taylor took some inspiration from oh my goodness, what was the name of the Conan? Fertitta? No, I can't remember the name of the Conan artist. I should have looked it up. But of course, some of the animals, like the Big Jim animals, like the Big Jim on the Tiger Trail, as well as the Eagle of Danger Peak, were both items that were adopted from the Big Jim toy line into the Masters of the Universe toy line, I guess to save on tooling, as the way Mark Ellis tells it on the Toys That Made Us episode. And Jim Largo says the name of the Conan artist was Frazetta, so that's who I meant to say. I said Fertitta, but Fertitta is actually, or was, I don't think they still are, but the Fertitta family owned the UFC for a while, so that's why I kind of mixed the two. But anyway, I've rambled on for a good 10 minutes or so here. I want to give a hello to the chat and see who managed to file in. We got James Ratface 44, we got Danjamin 905, Kieran Ball, Payne Toy Samples, Kenny Whitty stopping in for a little bit. We got Jim Largo, we got LM Hadley, Got a few others here. Yep. So that's who's in the chat right now. And again, I kind of assume everybody's watching the World Cup, and that's totally okay. Like I said, I willingly but involuntarily participated in a sweepstakes, and now I'm kind of hoping Ghana wins, which I don't think they're a favorite because, like I said, Phil did a random draw yesterday, and I ended up with Ghana. So, and Matthew Comstock put a very funny comment in the chat saying Ken's not gonna be happy, but that's totally okay. It's all part of the fun. I thank Phil for all his efforts doing that and for putting up prizes depending on how things go. And say a quick hello to Stephen S. as well as Kieran Ball makes a good point here, and that was actually going to be part of the discussion. And it was going to be part of the 12-inch G.I. Joe discussion here, is that the UK company Palitoy released their version of G.I. Joe as Action Man. Absolutely. And I think they started in 1966, and they started, I think, largely as a similar like companion line to G.I. Joe in the 60s, and then sort of migrated over and had kind of their own line. So I don't think all of the characters that were popular in Action Man necessarily had a G.I. Joe counterpart. Like, so when they downscaled Action Man into the first year of Action Force, I don't think, for example, that G.I. Joe, the 12-inch line, I don't think they had a Desert Rat, but that was one of the popular toy lines in the UK, and that ended up becoming the downscaled into Palitoy. And of course, as you know, it's also in the modern Action Force line with Tony there. But correct me if I'm wrong. When I looked through Daryl DePriest's book, I didn't find an equivalent to the Desert Rat. This is the book that kind of inspired this stream in some ways. Now, so Daryl DePriest was a former VP of Hasbro, and he wrote this book back, I think, in 1999 or 2000. I got to check the actual print date of this book, and that's when I've been reading through this. I got through a bunch of it. I got through a lot of the core chapters and just learned a lot. Like, me and how I tend to think. I love toy histories. I just absolutely adore toy histories, and this is what got me started and me thinking, man, we need to do a stream on sort of like the origin of toys. Now, and sorry, I just realized I haven't finished reading Kieran's comment here. Yeah, they invented the gripping hands, eagle eyes, and fuzzy hair, right? So I think in G.I. Joe, they called it Kung Fu grip and lifelike hair. I'm not sure if they had their own eagle eyes version. So yeah, it doesn't look like yeah, so apparently Ghana's not going to win the World Cup. And yeah, Palitoy did their own thing, story. I didn't realize there was much of a story. I thought the story was from the Action Force line that came later on. And Gazz has made it. Thank you for taking a World Cup break for me. And 1000th Ghost Toys. Now, let me know if next weekend, if I do a similar time like this, whether or not I'm going to be interfering with the World Cup, because I do know a lot of people. I don't want to split people's time unnecessarily, even if they can catch the replay of this. I still want to make it convenient if I can, or maybe I'll just pick a time that works for me. So some of you will notice that I am wearing my Slaughterhouse swag here right now. So yeah. Ryan Sweeney's in the house, and yes, Stephen, I kind of figured. So yeah, I got this off of TeePublic. It's interesting because like the head, you can see it's hard to get my head through. I don't think I have that big of a head, but like I thought maybe this was too small for me, but the shoulder lines are way down here, so I think I picked the right size. And as for the people who are channel members and patrons like Ryan Sweeney, 1000th Ghost Toys, Gazz, Jim Largo. I know, Jim, you said you don't have the greatest internet connection, but don't let that be a detractor. If you check the channel members tab or the Patreon email, you will see a link to StreamYard to join me in about 30 minutes time for sort of a members and patrons open mic session after the core discussion. Now, a lot of you folks are G.I. Joe fans in here, so I think what I'm going to do is I'll fire up, I'll share screens, and I'll start with the G.I. Joe discussion. And you'll see here, this is directly out of, like, all the photos for the G.I. Joe stuff are taken directly out of this Daryl DePriest book. And in a perfect world, I would be able to do history videos of basically everything that we grew up with and everything that inspired us. Like those of you have seen the video collaboration I did with Articulated Chad that had to do with the 82 G.I. Joe run. You saw my 1987 video of Transformers that I did with Phil from Treasures for Trigger. You've probably seen my LJN wrestling videos, and Zazel and I are working on one right now. And you've probably seen my 1984 history of Transformers. If I could have gone back and done it, and if I had had the ability and track record and credibility to do a 12-inch G.I. Joe history video and kind of split it off between, like, you know, you've got the original Painted Head era, and then you've got the Adventure Team era, and you've got kind of the lifelike hair in between. I would have loved to do that, but I just don't have the instinctive knowledge on it. Like, as I talk here, I'm probably speaking hopefully somewhat intelligibly to this, but I don't have like the long track record to be able to speak to it with confidence, right? And even with like Diaclone and Microchange with Transformers, I haven't gone through like a history yet. I've done a little bit of like the evolution of toys where I've talked about like, here was Diaclone Battle Convoy or Optimus. Here is the Diaclone Tiger Track or Sideswipe before he became Sideswipe, and showed and tracked the evolution of the toys, but not necessarily like a super dedicated history video, albeit a lot of people will still consider that a history video of sorts anyway. So I guess you can somewhat kill two birds with one stone with that. I don't know about the rest of you in the chat, but when I was growing up and all the way up until like my late 20s, I didn't realize that G.I. Joe had a 12-inch line. I just didn't. And in fact, when I did hear about it, I kind of dismissed it. I was like, oh, okay, so it was like 12-inch, you know, it was the Barbie equivalent. And I never stopped to think about how long it had run, how popular it was, and how different it was. Because as you can see here with the going left to right, the Action Soldier, Action Sailor, Action Marine, Action Pilot, and the African-American version of the Action Soldier, I didn't realize that, you know, it was largely meant to be a generic soldier with outfits that you can shift around and switch out and accessorize. Now, given that that's such a different theme and you're not going with named characters, I never saw G.I. Joe as anything other than, you know, Duke, Hawk, Snake Eyes, Flint, Beachhead, Stalker, Scarlet, whoever. I never saw it that way, and I never thought that, oh, Cobra didn't exist in this. You know, when I did find out about G.I. Joe happening in the 60s and 70s, I didn't even stop to think, about G.I. Joe not even having Cobra or a specific enemy to fight. And that makes more sense because they talk about it in the Toys That Made Us, that and Chad says this in my History of G.I. Joe 1982 video with him, that it was a late addition by somebody at Marvel Comics to throw in Cobra as the enemy faction, and that there was never really a conceived enemy faction for G.I. Joe for the Real American Hero era. And it makes sense because they didn't have that faction during the 12-inch era. So I guess, yeah, like I'm saying, it makes sense. I have seen some of these types of figures at toy shows before, and I have been tempted to grab some of them. It was closer to 2014 when I was hearing about a 50th anniversary of G.I. Joe. Now, I wasn't in my 20s at the time. I was more in my 30s, but that's when I stopped to think about, why is it called a 50th anniversary? And it was the 50th anniversary of 1964. So I'm like, oh, so that makes sense, right? Because I was thinking to myself that in 2007, they did a 25th anniversary of Real American Hero. And so 2014 comes along, and I'm like, why did we jump to the 50th anniversary? What's going on here? So now it makes sense, right? And so apparently I'm not the only one. Bill Lionaire says he didn't know about the 60s Joes as well growing up. Wilhelm has joined. And Wilhelm, you're a Patreon supporter, so if you do want to pop in about 25 minutes time for an open mic session with the patrons and channel members, feel free. Stephen S. Never knew in 82 that there was a Barbie-sized line until his dad had told him. So there you go. And Epic Badger says that in a rural era, he never saw the original Joes, only the 90s and whenever he visited a new city. So, yeah. What I do like, though, is the connective tissue between the G.I. Joe that our parents' era grew up with and the era that we grew up with. And all fairness to that, I think my dad was already a university student by the time the 64 GI Joe came out. And admittedly, some people who were a few years older than me might remember the late era before GI Joe folded for the first time. So I say our parents' era, but I'm saying that as a very generic term. So as GI Joe carries on, as I'm talking about the connective tissue, I look at uniforms like this, and this is the dress parade Marine outfit of GI Joe. And of course, I look at this and I automatically relate it to the version 2 1987 edition of Gung Ho. And if I saw this at a toy show for a reasonable price, and I understand that I don't think this was one of the more popular sets from GI Joe in the 1960s. So when I saw this, right, my personal connection to it, because I see Gung Ho version 2, I would love to like get something like this, put it next to my much smaller GI Joe and say, this is the evolution of how toys developed, right? This is what, Gung Ho was in that very commercialized Saturday morning cartoon era and had that dress uniform in his version 2. This is inspired by real military, but when you're connecting GI Joe to GI Joe, you kind of think you can't help but feel like one of them inspires the other, right? So yeah, and some people like Pencilus Dragon Ball, born in 75, so you probably only saw very leftover 12-inch Joes. But I do know there are people out there who are born closer to 1970, and they will obviously have missed the Action Soldier and Green Beret era, but they could have grown up with the late Adventure Team era and into the transition out of G.I. Joe in 78 and would have been old enough to experience G.I. Joe Real American Hero in full. I was born in 82, so I don't even remember the first few years of G.I. Joe. It was closer to the late 80s when I got into it. So maybe that's why it's near and dear to my heart, because I was watching a lot of the Real American Hero cartoons and I ended up kind of being like, why can't I find these figures on the shelf? And instead of buying Tiger Force versions and Iron Grenadiers versions. Like the Destro I grew up with was the Iron Grenadiers version. The Duke I grew up with was the Tiger Force version. And I didn't even find the 89 Snake Eyes on shelves. By the time I got my first Snake Eyes figure, it was a Ninja Force figure. So there you go, right? 1000th Ghost says he still has some of his OG Joe, or his dad has some of his some OG Joes. And yes, as I was going through Daryl DePriest's book here, they had so many outfits, right? And yeah, they also had vehicles for the Barbie sized Joes, and that they look awesome. And they do. When I was looking at the tower that they released, is it the training center? I'm not sure exactly what it's called. That thing just looks massive, just the scale for 12-inch Joes. And as we look at the connective tissue for G.I. Joe, I mean, my introduction, because I don't have a military background or come from a military family, so I first heard the term Green Beret from the Falcon figure. Obviously, Green Beret and SF is a very common thing, through the decades and decades that happened before in the U.S. military. But again, I knew nothing about it. So when I see a uniform like this coming where I come from, I just think, ooh, that's the predecessor to Falcon. And in many ways it is. It's so much more than that, right? But, 6-year-old me, because I got in 88, I remember because I got into Joe's in 88, and then they still had leftover 87 product on the shelf and even some leftover 86 product. I was able to get a Falcon figure. And of course, when I saw this much later on in life, I saw it and I'm like, wow, that's what Falcon would be if he was a 12-inch Joe, right? And that's just I don't know if that's considered ignorant or what, but I know someone who lives 10 minutes from me and wants to sell me a complete Green Beret for about $400. I don't think that comes with the bazooka or the radio kit. I think it's just the Green Beret in his original release. And he has both the blonde painted head and the brown-haired painted head. Now, 400, that's Canadian. That's about 300 US. If some of you in the chat know whether that's a fair price or not, let me know. I have not pulled the trigger yet because when I looked on eBay, I was finding it was quite a bit lower. Now, his argument back is that on eBay, a lot of the stuff has like frazzled cloth, frazzled, outfits, not in great condition. And his are apparently in very, very, very good condition, which I saw, but I still thought that the equivalent of 300 US was a bit much to pay even for a complete Green Beret. And, you know, in my mind, even if he included the bazooka set, from what I could tell, it seemed to be a bit much. Just carrying on here. I know I'm spending a lot of time on G.I. Joe, but looking at the adventure team here, as we get a little bit more into the canon of it and where I think they should amalgamate a bit more of this into the real American hero, you've got the adventure team. So you got more themes here, right? You've got a adventure team commander. You've got the land adventurer, sea adventurer, air adventurer, so on and so forth, right? Yeah, the comment here on Facebook, I don't know which user this is, because Facebook has certain privacy restrictions, but yes, totally a predecessor to Falcon. How could it not be? There you go, right? Much agreed. Much agreed. And Wilhelm says here that he was 6 or 7 when the ARA commercials came out, and he asked his dad for a G.I. Joe, and he got a 12-inch one because it wasn't the vamp he saw on TV. I was tempted to buy a vamp yesterday, actually, a complete one. I may yet go for one because now I have a 83 headquarters for it to fit into. And yeah, when I talk to the guy who lives 10 minutes away from me, he's 60 years old. And he always jokes to me about my undersized G.I. Joes, and I always joke to him about his Barbie wannabes, right? Or his male Barbies. So, I mean, look, there's a lot of connective tissue here. But again, if any of the patrons and channel members want to come on a little bit later on, you can just wait backstage until I put you on. We can definitely chat a bit more about this. When I put up the poll the other day about what people enjoy among my content, the overwhelming majority was G.I. Joe. Then came Transformers, number 2, but it was still a 2-to-1 ratio. We can still talk G.I. Joe throughout this, but I do want to move the discussion forward a little bit here towards Transformers and the Diaclone and well, actually, this is all Diaclone, and the Jetfire in the back is from Macross. I don't have any figures from the Microchange line, but like much in the way, even though a little different from G.I. Joe, and how the 64 12-inch line inspired the downscaled from the 12-inch into the 3 3/4 inch, a Real American Hero line. Diaclone and Microchange and a few other toy lines like Macross and Toy Box set the stage for what would become the Transformers. The difference, obviously, is that a lot of the molds and the tooling were taken one for one from these Japanese toy companies, rather than taking, you know, a figure body and downscaling it and changing up the figure construction entirely and adding an O-ring. So thematically, it's kind of the same thing, but it's also very different in terms of the actual execution of it, right? I think the orange flight suit one is the action pilot, by the way, Gazz. And yes, it's interesting to look at the origins of all the toy lines. And yeah, I'd love to do like dedicated history videos, but as much as I like to share knowledge with the rest of you, I still very much consider myself, I guess the term is a student of the game. I am always trying to learn. Even when I prep the Transformers Deathsaurus and Victory Saber videos that came out in the last couple of weeks, what happened there was, as much as I did know about those characters, I also needed to do a lot of research on Wiki, watch old episodes, and I'm kind of slowly going through that right now with the Diaclone figures and the backstory of the 12-inch Joes. And Gaz here sees, the Diaclone dinosaur Robo, which became the predecessor for Grimlock. And as you can see, he comes with a blue waist rather than a gray waist, and that's what makes him a little different and a bit more unique. And you can't see it in the photo because I didn't put it in the photo, but he comes with a chrome sword as well rather than the red sword, right? And it's just interesting to see how and yes, Pains, the Macross connection, yeah, there were a lot of rights issues, and I put that on my history and story of Jetfire video a few months ago. I talked a bit about that as well. But yes, it's interesting to see how the line got adapted into North America. Like if you look at Ultra Magnus, the Diaclone version of him, he's a very different color, although he's the exact same mold. The Dinobots, you'll see there's a GIG or GIG logo at the top. No one has been able to tell me whether or not the GIG Italian releases came with Diaclone drivers. I know the Japanese one did. but I haven't been able in my research to find out whether or not the Italian releases did, because it's the same figure in the box, but in Italy they release it in their own like similar style packaging, but with the Gig branded logo at the top. And again, it's Brandon. I need you to be quiet. Yeah, I need you to be quiet because yeah, I'm live right now. I need you to be quiet. But yes, feel free to help yourself. Sorry, I gave him breakfast, but he's still looking for other things to eat in the kitchen. So, anyway, yeah. So, what was I saying here? When they released it in, because Diaclone wasn't released just in Japan, right? It did have some releases in Europe. I know that the French company Joustra took it on and licensed it from Takara, and the Italian company Gig licensed it from Takara as well in Italy. So, yeah. And Kyle Getz makes a good point here. Since we're on the subject of Hasbro and the lines, because Transformers and G.I. Joe were the big lines of the 80s, especially G.I. Joe before Transformers came along. And actually, he's talking about the 64 G.I. Joe. Now that I read the sentence more clearly, Hasbro's best-selling line was Mr. Potato Head. And I think Kirk Bazigian makes a comment about this in the Toys That Made Us G.I. Joe episode. So they hadn't forayed deep into the action figure market yet, which makes sense because the G.I. Joe, the term action figure came from G.I. Joe. So makes sense. To your point, Kyle Getz. Now, again, the origin of this with Transformers, it's just Diaclone and Microchange. The figures, so the characters were not considered sentient beings, and the adaptation of turning them into like sentient beings who could think and feel and all that and talk and hear, that came with the inception of the Transformers. And there were a lot of differences too, like what limited storyline there was on bio cards and instruction booklets and whatnot. Someone like Devastator, who's known as an iconic Decepticon, past and present, was apparently a good guy in his Diaclone construction robot form. Something I didn't know, right? But again, as I research more of this, the idea is to catalog as much of this in video form for you all to present. And a stream like this helps me out every bit as much as it helps some of you out, because if some of you throw comments into the chat, I'm learning a little bit as well, right? Like I'm trying to catalog the information in my head and eventually present everything in an uploaded format later on, obviously piecemealed over the years. But that's but again, like I said, I'm trying to learn and turn around and present stuff as best I can. Now, as mentioned before, this Valkyrie here, this Robotech, caused a ton of problems in licensing between Harmony Gold and Sunbow / Hasbro / Marvel in terms of the likeness. And even though the likeness of the Valkyrie was adopted into Jetfire, they had to change his animation model in order to avoid legal rights and legal issues. And right up to this day, Hasbro has never reissued a G1 style Jetfire, right? As Bandai now owns the rights to the likeness of that figure. So you'll see as well here that this is the GBP 1S armor of the Valkyrie. It was actually the Super Valkyrie that was adopted into Jetfire's toy. Now, the difference, obviously, is just in the armor. The actual physical robot itself is the same. And actually, part of the armor is the same from the Super Valkyrie set, at least the backpack and the boosters. But all the extra armor here is different from the Super Valkyrie that was adopted. So let's see what Will says here. The toys were just toys. The IP part of it in the story were concepts. They were not universal in the industry. So there you go. So companies just wanted to sell toys. TJC, if you want to hop on here in about 10 or 15 minutes, check the StreamYard link on the channel membership tab. Same goes for you, Gazz, Ryan, everybody else who happens to be Patreon supporters or channel members. Hop in. You'll see the private link either in your email or on the channel membership tab, depending on how your Toy Connections patronage is set up. Now, so I mean, this could be a whole stream itself, right? Just Diaclone, Microchange, and all the predecessors of the Transformers toy line. Now, I'm still buying some of these here and there, and a funny story is that I tend to buy the ones when the really high-end collectors that I know here locally in Vancouver, when they upgrade their toys, they sell me their like mediocre condition ones. So like the reason I have that Diaclone Battle Convoy is because somebody else found one with a better box in slightly more complete condition. I'm missing the Diaclone drivers for it. And they're like, well, we don't need this. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I will buy your reject. You can keep your platinum, I will take your gold. Similar thing happened with the Sideswipe box. Actually, all of these are pretty much just people's. Well, the Grimlock was sold to me actually by another collector who sold me a G1 collection, and this was in it. And I bought the whole collection and sold the rest to keep the Grimlock. So, and yeah, I mean, the G1 Jetfire is a top 3 grail item of all time, irrespective of IP. I've actually got one in the box. The box is a bit beat up, but I've got it. So, yeah, Wilhelm. And again, you can join too the stream if you want. Wilhelm, a mediocre is a grail to some, and that's how I feel about it, right? Your expensive but not super expensive toy, I say to my friends, is still a grail to me, right? Left Coast Graphics, Rick. I don't know if you've edited your video yet of yesterday's show, but feel free to pop it in the chat there, because Rick and I ran into each other yesterday at a toy show, and we made some deals. So good to see you here, Left Coast Graphics. So all along the same lines here with the predecessors for Transformers and G.I. Joe. This one I did not. For Masters of the Universe, I didn't have my own photo or a book that I could show, but I did do before the stream started. I did do a Big Jim on the Tiger Trail search, and obviously this is the tiger that became Battle Cat. Funny enough, I don't actually have a vintage Masters of the Universe collection, but if I saw a Big Jim on the Tiger Trail, I would be tempted to get one just because of what it represents. Because as much as this is the Big Jim Tiger, it is also what kicked off the characters of Battle Cat and Panther for the decades and decades that would follow. It's why I have a Diaclone Battle Convoy to represent Optimus Prime. It's why I mulled over a Green Beret and walked away from it after much, gritting of teeth, and I can't spend that price. It doesn't seem right. I don't know enough about the line. Whereas, that's what happened to me with the Green Beret figure, because it was completely different from Joe. With the Diaclone Battle Convoy, a lot of the accessories are the same as the bloated fists and bloated accessories original Optimus Prime, so I had familiarity, and I just had to look at what the differences were, like with the roller accessory and the Diaclone drivers. So that's why I was able to pick that up. I will probably delve back into 12-inch Joes to some extent, just because of what they represent. But if I saw this at a show, I would be very tempted. Now, I know Mark Ellis on the Toys That Made Us MOTU app, they ran out of tooling budget, and he basically said, get the Big Jim Tiger, and they're like, it's going to be out of scale, and he's like, put an effing saddle on it, and then they did, and it became a cultural icon. Like, who knew that this would happen, right? This is another topic I'd love to cover on its own dedicated, video of sorts, is the evolution of the Big Jim Tiger into Battle Cat / Panther. And it's a story a lot of people already know, but I'd also like to go back and look at least a brief history and overview of the Big Jim line and what this tiger represented there. And also the eagle, which I'm going to show. The eagle of, is it Lookout Point or Dreaded Point? I don't know exactly what it's called, but there's an eagle as well that they adopted, which I can do a search for in a second, right? Gaz says this is Hobbs. I say, yeah, it's kind of Hobbs, not quite. If you walked on 2 legs, it'd be Hobbs, right? Oh, yes, it was also the Mattel Tarzan Black Panther. That's right. I completely forgot about that. And I think that came a bit later, right? Like, I think that came... Did that come after Masters of the Universe was already out? I think it did. Highly in Dread says he was able to get the Origins Roton from Walmart. Hasn't been able to find one in stores online since it was released months ago. I guess that's a general comment about MOTU. Hades of the 80s. I'm seeing some new names here in the chat. Have I explored Mego Micronauts and the influence on toy lines in the 70s? So I mean, that's outside of the scope of this video, but it is within the scope of toy histories in general. And I know that, you know, Mego Micronauts, Micronauts was the reason they turned down Star Wars, right? Is the story there with Marty Friedman, I think, who ran Mego at the time. So, would I touch on it? Probably. I don't know enough about Micronauts to dive in and have a close look at it. But of course, it's one of those toy lines that, you know, didn't take off as much as the rest as the big three of the 80s, or as much as, you know, Star Wars did. So it wasn't something I was planning to cover, but if there are interesting facts about it, I wouldn't mind doing like short clips and short videos on it, just to kind of catalog onto the channel, right? So along the same lines, oops, what am I doing here? No. I'm trying to do a search for the Big Jim Eagle right now. Big Jim Eagle. Oh, come on, darn you. Yeah, Eagle of Danger Peak. I think that's the one that was the predecessor for Zoar / Screech. And this looks like it's just an eBay listing, so I don't think anybody actually owns the rights to this, or if they do, they transfer the rights to whoever buys the figure. So, you know, just as an example here with the Big Jim Eagle of Danger Peak. Again, I know virtually nothing about Big Jim. I do know it was a mid 1970s toy line, and that these figures with their leftover tooling allowed and paved the way for Masters of the Universe to get kind of to have some of the animals in their toy line. And again, when I look at the Big Jim Eagle, you know, when I look at it, yeah, it's a kind of a generic bald eagle, you know, the American symbol. And sorry, I need to take a sip of the coffee because I'm needing some caffeine. But it's because of what it spawned in pop culture, right? And with the origin of toys being so important to me, it's just one of those things that if I saw it at a toy show, I would absolutely want to grab it, jump on it, and be like, this represents toy history right here, right? I mean, if I'm really looking at toy history and I look at Diaclone Battle Convoy, the cab is almost 1-for-1 to G1 Optimus, at least the original release of G1 Optimus with the first 1984 release. And it's a trailer and some of the accessories that have some differences, and obviously the box. But, you know, by and large, it's a figure I already have. But with what it represents in toy history, I kind of felt it was a must-have into my collection archive. So when I look at the Big Jim Eagle, it's very much the same thing. I'm not even sure I would want a complete one, to be honest with you. So, but anyway, let's catch up with the chat a little bit. And like I said to the channel members, I heard a few of the channel members said that, and patrons said they would be able to join, but I'm not sure if that's changed since last night, because I just sent the notice out last night, kind of inviting everybody, and I'm not sure if everybody got to it in their emails or checked the channel tab yet. But let's have a look at what some people have to say here. Big Jim had a resurgence in Europe as Tarzan and cowboy figures. So did they reuse the tooling? I guess this is outside of my scope of familiarity, but you know, I'm all ears as far as this is concerned. So let me know. Favorite of the Big Jim was the Wolf Pack, the Jack Kirby. Oh yes, legendary artist Jack Kirby did that. And yeah, see, they had a big resurgence in Guatemala as well. So I guess overseas, right? And Jim Largo adds only part of it. Oh, here's actually something that I wanted to touch on earlier. MD, new name in the chat, but welcome. Rest in peace, Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger. So this is a little bit, I wasn't sure how I was going to tackle this topic today, but I do thank you for bringing this in. I was a bit shaken up this morning because when I woke up, I saw the news of Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger / White Ranger's death today. Because of the year I was born, I was able to overlap the early years of Power Rangers, particularly Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I know this is a toy origins stream, and 90s toys are not necessarily part of the scope of this stream, but this is an exceptional case. And Jason David Frank, MMA fighter, later in life, actor, black belt martial artist, Power Ranger leader, will be sorely and dearly missed. And I'm not just saying that. I mean it because when I was closer to 11 or 12 and able to play with my toys on a meaningful and creative basis, and I brought my toys to my friend's house, the Green Ranger and White Ranger were right at the center of that. I played the wheels off of my figures. I still have my original Green Ranger from 1993 and my original Dragon Zord. Jason Frank meant a lot to pop culture in my mind. And a lot of people who stopped watching Power Rangers in that after the first few seasons, he continued as the Red Ranger in Zeo. Actually, there we go. Comment just came in from Highly and Dread. He loved Mighty Morphin and Zeo. And he was the Red Ranger in Zeo. He was the Red Ranger in Turbo in 1997. And a lot of people don't know this. He was also the Black Ranger as a mentor character in the 2004 Power Rangers Dino Thunder. So he's worn green, red, black, as well as white. And I think he had a Master Morpher in the cartoon as well, in the recent comic as well. So rest in peace, Jason David Frank. I had many times in the playground where I pretended to be either Tommy or Jason. And a lot of memories with some of my friends playing Power Ranger stuff. So it's actually a bit of a heavy heart this morning when I woke up and saw the news. And apparently I heard he committed suicide. Changing things up a little bit here, I'm going to welcome my good friend from Wilhelm Toy and Hobby, patron of the channel, Will, to the chat.
Oh, well, hello, everyone. Hi, Ken. Hi, chat.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's my first day off in like 14 days, so I'm really happy to not have any obligations today. So here I am.
Awesome. And I don't know if this guy's ever done a stream before, but for the first time on Toy Connections, we got our good friend, and I get to talk to him in real time. So I'm actually pretty excited here. Jim Largo.
Hey, Jim Largo. How are you?
I'm good. How's everybody today?
Yeah, it's so good to see you.
Have you had a chance to stream with one of our other friends before, like with Grindhead Jim, or is this your first time on, Jim?
I've actually hung out with Will a few times when he's been playing with his 3D printer.
I saw that actually. What am I talking about? Because I'm subscribed to Will, and I'm like, it's I might be subscribed.
Jim did me the honor of giving me a toy room tour on my stream, which was
that's awesome.
I appreciate. Yeah.
And I just realized, Will, I might actually be subscribed to your channel on my backup channel, like the one where I put my Patreon videos. I might not actually be subscribed on Toy Connection. So shame on me. You know the channel I talk, because sometimes I'm logged in there and I'm putting up like Patreon videos for you guys, and then I think I might have subbed there.
I've done that too, where I have just my personal just my name channel, and I'll realize I'm not subscribed on one or the other. I feel bad. It happens.
Yeah.
Us Gen Xers, we're still working on learning all this technology. All the web things.
And I think you both heard me a few weeks ago saying I was really choked when I found out that the cutoff for Gen X was like a year before me or something like that. And how choked I am because
you can be an honorary member, Ken. It's okay.
Well, the thing is, right? Like I had a co-op student, like an intern student work for me that was like 12 years younger, right? And I had a few of those who were like, 10 to 13 years younger. And always like, you millennials and your devices and all that, and now I realize the joke was on me the whole time.
Yeah, so I'm pulling up a calendar. Technically, you're one of us as well. I don't really subscribe to that. I think it's all just in the person themselves.
You know what I've used as a cop out before is that in the old, like my ancestors, often like my grandparents' era, they often said that the in Chinese years they add a year because they count the time that you were in your mother's stomach. So they always like add a year. So I'm always like, okay, so I'll just be an honorary born like 1981. But depending where you look, the cutoff for millennial is either 80 or 81, depending where you look. So I don't even quite get there, even when I try to stretch the truth.
I know where you were raised. I'm the youngest brother. I have older brother, so I was influenced by everything they did. So I would act and be into the things that were more in the 70s, than the 80s. So my friends would be into this and that, and I was always following the trends of my older brother and his friends. So, it kind of put me in a different, generation as well.
Well, that was
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, in a lot of ways, Will and I kind of had the best of the toy years because, we grew up in the early 70s. So we still had a lot of the classic 70s stuff, whether it was the Mego, Planet of the Apes, or the superheroes. Then we had the Big Joes. And then we were still young enough to enjoy the new Joes when they came out in the 80s and all the good stuff that you guys enjoyed growing up too.
Well, that's just it, right? And I kind of feel like because I largely missed the Star Wars era and the early G.I. Joe, I kind of feel like I missed part of that, what I call the golden boom, which kind of started with Star Wars, though that's not to disregard everything that came before Star Wars, like Big Jim and all that, but there was kind of a rise before the highly commercialized era, because my understanding, just talking to people like Brendan Haley, who's a few years older than me as well, said that, like, toys were not as widespread. Like, yes, you had G.I. Joes on shelves, you had Big Jim stuff, but after Star Wars and through to like the Turtles era, the boom went to another level, right?
Yeah.
Like, you kind of went from what I kind of call a Genesis era, like I'm being really like weirdly technical, from like this Genesis inception to a golden boom, right? But yeah,
Kenner was definitely a game changer with Star Wars, because before that, toys were just, something you found at the whether you were at Kmart or what have you, and you'd go in and you'd get a chance to run to the toy aisle and see what was new. And suddenly this movie from 77 just blew up, and merchandising was everywhere, and it became pop culture. I don't know, toys were a minor part of pop culture before that, but after Star Wars.
Yeah, but they really certainly didn't adopt the concepts of, this over, it covered the storyline that connected all of the toys together, or, the IP. Like I was saying before, where you see so many fragmented kind of offshoots of the Diaclone and Transformers stuff, it was because most of these people were just taking it. They're like, oh, popular toy, let's repackage it and sell it, and they were just putting it out. They were really not concerned with any of the other stuff that we hold dear now, which is the tie-ins with the movies, TVs, comics, and collect them all. Became a really big part of that whole culture that really erupted.
For 80s. Will and I, it's kind of become an inside joke looking at all of the different knockoffs and bootlegs or licensed or unlicensed versions of things that we'll find, whether it's from Mexico or China. And some that are homages, some that are just really horrible copies. But it's like, it's that same idea. If this is popular at the moment, somebody somewhere is going to try to bring it into their market and just put their little spin on it.
Absolutely.
I think these, like Diaclone, I think all those companies were just putting it out, and they were just like, we'll ask forgiveness later, and then maybe there was some, corporate scuffles with, names and licensing and all that stuff, but they probably just smoothed that all out on the back end.
Well, remember,
the Diaclone was the original, wasn't it? Those were the guys that did the engineering and created the original. Okay.
Yep. Yoki-san, I think, sculpted from the Diaclone before, with Takara, before they adopted him for Transformers. And they had licensing. Like, for example, Marlboro was stickered all over Wheeljack, and I'm not sure, like, did they ever get the license for that? And you notice they've never made a Marlboro one in North America, right? So the licensing,
and those guys were just setting out to make a cool toy. It became a trend. The transforming toy. They didn't really care so much about the scale or how it went with other toys or anything like that. They were just making.
That's another
cool.
Interesting thing that's changed is the idea of a backstory or lore. For me as a kid, I had the Fuzzy Head Adventure Team G.I. Joes. They didn't have much of a backstory. They'd have a few comic panels where they would advertise the toy as a one-page little adventure. There were some, little storybooks that came with an audio cassette, but they were very simplistic. Then in the 80s, when Real American Hero came out, you've got Larry Hama and all these other creative ideas behind not just the toy, but here's a great backstory. Here's these great villains in Cobra. Here's, all these great stories, and then the Marvel comics and everything else that came after. So backstory became really important with the newer toys as well.
For sure. And I think eventually in the Marvel comics, like later in the run, like around issue 80-ish, they did bring in the original G.I. Joe, called him Joe Colton. And I don't think they specified whether he was the action soldier or the action marine or which he was. I kind of just assumed he was the original action soldier because they said West Point, and I think West Point is an army.
Yes.
Is army.
Yeah.
So everyone's just assumed he's the original action soldier.
From the confusion my father had when I first asked for G.I. Joe, and he handed me that doll, and I'm like, this isn't what I wanted, and you couldn't like rewind the TV. So like, I remember one day the commercial came on, I dragged him into the room. I'm like, that's what I want, and he was like, what is that? He's like, that's not G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe.
That's like the idea of
the
concept of crossovers. I remember
Yeah.
I had the fortune of living in Scotland when I was a kid, and so I was introduced to Action Man, and then
cool.
I think I left just before Action Force, before the Action Force became a big thing. But the first crossover, in the comics, they did a action. What was it called? Battle Action Force.
Battle Action Force. Yeah.
They did a comic
Weekly,
they did a crossover with Transformers.
Yes.
So it's like here you've got two different toy brands brought together for the first time in a comic book. It's like I can see those toys in the store and I can see them in the comic book. That's cool.
Yeah. And my dad, he would go through my figures. He'd go, where is G.I. Joe? He'd be looking for him. And I'm like, no, they're all G.I. Joe. Dad, you're so stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. But I realized later, he was looking for a miniature version of the bearded, fuzzy head, action man or G.I.
Which
Joe.
we kind of got him in 1994, but no beard anymore. Like when they did Joe Colton. What I like with that one is I think Hooded Cobra Commander 788 did a video on him and said he's got the original action soldier uniform, but they put the 66 Green Beret on him. So it's kind of like a homage. He was the original action soldier and he was your 66 Green Beret, which is kind of cool. So like when I look at those figures, I relate them back to Joe Colton, which is funny because I'm doing it backwards, right? Like I wasn't introduced to the 12-inch line. I'm finding the connective tissue from before, and it's also neat, right? Like I get this like warm, tingly feeling going, wow, there's all this history I can study,
That's how I felt.
I don't know how well this will show up on camera, but
the SAS Commando.
He really kind of looks like the old 12-inch Joes in the face because obviously that's who he was modeled on.
He does.
And can we bring up the point? I mean, G.I. Joe, I understand naming it. I mean, I don't really understand naming a team after just one guy. Action Force, the international, heroes, is a much better, overall kind of name for the team. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I heard about it, I was intrigued because it was like the first new thing I heard about in decades. When I finally, and this is probably late 2000s when I heard about Action Force or Action Man. I did not know that there was that whole parallel, toy line and everything. And I was like, it was better than what we had. I mean, it's
feel the same.
Yeah,
feel the same.
Joe was very American centric in its design, whereas
I like the idea of
teams,
a worldwide, international force where they're taking the best soldiers from all these countries and they're coming together to stop global terrorism.
I also feel that the name G.I. Joe has not aged very well. Yeah. Like I hate to say it, but when I'm talking to somebody who doesn't know Joe's and I gotta say I'm into G.I. Joe, I feel I cringe a little. And I'm like, why couldn't they call it Action Force here? Why couldn't they? I'm in Canada. And I'm like, how did we get G.I. Joe as a name? Why did they adopt it as Action Force in Canada? Darn it.
It is. It's a little cringy. Yeah.
And I like Full Force more than I like Yo Joe. I'm sorry. I just do.
I'm really a huge fan of that either. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a shame.
I'm glad we all agree. I thought I was crazy this whole time.
No. It's like, like I said, I got to see a little bit of the Palatoy stuff as a young kid before I moved back to the States. And so, I saw Action Man and then I come back with the Joes. I'm like, it's similar, but it's just not quite there.
Yeah,
But
everything I see about
they,
Palatoy, I'm just blown away by, just what a wonderful company they were. I mean, just really
well,
inventive the way they
yeah,
changed.
the amazing back and forth they would do. It's
Right,
like,
you said-
they would take the Star Wars things that were licensed to Palatoy and they would make improvements, whether it was the land speeder or the X-wing. They put their own little spin on it and put it out. The Death Star, their version of the Death Star, I thought was much superior, even though it was, a cardboard set.
Yeah.
Super detail, much better than the, kind of funky plastic elevator thing that Kenner gave us.
Yeah.
And
I just
same
think
thing
that-
with taking what G.I. Joe had and converting it to Action Force, and vice versa with the 12-inch guys, like someone had mentioned before. The lifelike hair, the grip, that was Palatoy. The eagle eyes, those eventually went back over and became Joe features as well for the adventure team. But so the guys at Palatoy had some great concepts and ideas for design. So sometimes superior to wherever they were borrowing from.
I wonder though if Hasbro had launched, just the identical toy line, but without that brand recognition of GI Joe, because what they were doing was taking an IP that kind of dwindled, and I don't know if it ever fully died. Was it ever fully discontinued?
In
Or was it-
78,
think so.
yeah. In 78,
So for just a few years, it was.
They were
was
still kind of on the shelf collecting dust here and there. But I think
oh yeah, they
from
would have
what
had
I remember-
leftovers. Yes,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
it's possible that stuff lingers on shelves for a couple of years. Like there's been times where I didn't know that a toy line was dead, and then I saw it 2 years later in stores, maybe clearancing. So you might have seen it in 80, and
Yeah.
then by 82, it's kind of fuzzy in everybody's memories. But yes, I mean
And
that was part
they
of the.
wanted to bring
yeah.
it back, but they wanted to do something different, and that's
Mhm.
kind of really the only thing they carried over was the name.
Mhm.
Well, it's
Toys
kind of
are
a weird
completely
history.
different than what the previous toy line was. They, some of the military is the same, but most of the other stuff is just completely different. And
Right.
they
I'm
just
not
use
an
that
expert,
name.
but just the idea of the economics and how those affected. We had the gas shortages, we had major inflation at that time. Plastic was really expensive, and that was a major contributing factor to why Mego
Mhm.
and Kenner and these other guys said, well, let's go to a smaller scale. For one,
And it
it's
was-
easier to make vehicles, and it's cheaper to make the toys, the figures. And it was super, super popular because now you could have a hero in your pocket. The 12-inch Joes, they're great, but you can't carry a whole army of Joes with you unless you've got a big suitcase. But when they came with the 3 3/4, now you can have an army in your pocket.
It's kind
you
of
throw
like
them
they
in your
took
school bag.
what was great about the 12-inch, and then like what was great about the bag of plastic green army men, and met somewhere in the
Yes.
middle, and went with it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I hadn't thought of it that way. But yeah, just the simple green army men were so much awesome. It was just something to play with. You could throw them.
You
together.
couldn't pose them worth a damn, but
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So they added
But
a
it's
little
that
bit. They
same
took a little
premise.
from the big.
Yeah.
Yeah, they took a little from that, and they just ran with
But
it.
yeah, it's like everybody borrowed from somebody. It's like with Mego, I remember when they went from their 8-inch down to the pocket heroes, they lost a lot of detail. They weren't great. But then they said, we've got this Microman thing that we got from Japan. Look at the engineering here. And then they did that for their Buck Rogers. They did that for a couple of their other lines that went on. But the engineering was there. And then Hasbro said, let's do that with the Joes. And they did this super articulation in these little guys that, again, it's an homage to what the Japanese engineers created. So everybody borrows from somebody.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, this guy said we're no longer friends, but I think he wants to tell me off on camera. So
Good.
I'm gonna quickly duck out of the way while he throws all worlds of shade at me, and he disagrees. He disagrees with me about the awesomeness of last night's wrestling pay-per-view. So I'm just gonna do this, and he can throw all the shade he wants right now. Ryan,
Oh boy.
All right.
Yeah, you can't look me in the eye after that. No, yo, Joe, huh? You suck, Kim. That's all I've got to say about that. How
hey
dare
Ralph,
you.
you want to come take over?
Although I do
Well,
have to say,
I knew it-
Ryan,
that
thank
just
you.
neutering.
Your review on some of the gridiron things are just awesome. I really like this jetpack. And, when I saw the Stalker, I said, I got to get that jetpack because I remember that was a great scene from the cartoons where he had the
absolutely.
jetpack on. They do great stuff. And
They
you do
do.
some great reviews.
Thank you very much. No, it's look, I got to give Ken grief all for knocking GI Joe. I'm sorry, just no.
Hey, I was always there for it, but then when I saw Action Force, I was like, oh,
It does have an appeal.
yeah, it does.
No,
have an
actually,
appeal.
Palatoy was great. They would take those Hasbro molds and they would go, we can make this better.
Yeah.
And then they would go ahead and they would do it. And then even with like the Action Man, my first GI Joe were my dad and my uncle's 12-inch Joes, and everything back then was based off of, your parents or your grandparents. You knew somebody who was in the service.
Right.
So those kids they had their own heroes. They were already in their family. So, it made a lot of sense that you had all those cool figures, but seeing what Palatoy would do by bringing in, dress uniforms, different things, they would bring in the desert campaigns. It just expanded that line even more. And then of course, with what they did with the Hasbro molds for the 3 3/4 inch, just absolutely blew me away. I think it's the Z-Force APC.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I was going to say that. Yes.
Such a
It's
great
brilliant.
improvement with the interior.
Yeah. And Bob created Robo Skull from a skull and a TIE fighter. I mean, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, Bob Breakin is a legend.
It just kills me that, they had no budget, yet he would come up with these crazy ideas. And with limited budget, limited tooling, they would create these wonderful toys. And Hasbro was great about going over to Japan and stealing all of that stuff and bringing it over here. Why didn't we go to the UK and get Robo Skull?
I think Ken's crying right now. He says Ryan and him are no longer friends. He has to go put up an ad. New friend wanted, has to be into Action Force or whatever. So you're all dealing with me. Hey, wait a minute. There's a guy in the bottom left. Is Hobbs there? Because I don't like tigers. I heard they eat dogs.
You're all wrong. It's Mega Force.
Mega Force
right.
is awesome. Yes.
Fair point.
right.
Mega
what
Force.
is it? Yes.
Mega Force should have gotten more love. That's for sure.
That's right.
Absolutely. All right.
And it's
All right.
GI Joe because I can't bring myself to go full force into battle. It's Yo Joe, not full force.
So I told Ken he was wrong. But he's still crying in the bathroom right now. Hey, Ralph, if you're gonna use my computer, can you at least wash your paws first? I mean, all right. Sorry, gents. I just got to take some cleaner to this thing. And
Ken, take a break. Let Ralph take over.
no, you know what? He took over long enough. Before I got to ground him or something. Anyway.
It's good to have a co-host, Ken, especially one that's so agreeable.
Yeah. About that agreeable part, not so much.
And I got to hand it to
Salty's
Gazz is
good.
correct, though. It is. It's definitely, in this case, it's G.I. Joe, Action Force, and then you've got,
Mega Force.
Mega Force is a great concept.
Yes.
Gaz, I don't know if you've seen this, but on Hobby Link Japan, I saw a model that has the larger Mega Force vehicle, and then the smaller the motorcycles and the
comm truck with the
yes,
that opens up as if it's like a sand crawler or something like that. The little bike.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I've been thinking about picking that up.
Yeah, but it's $50 and it's like $50 to ship over.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Gaz,
that's the
this is
downside.
coming from the guy who would spend like $150 on an autographed bootleg copy of Megaforce
I
by.
spent $150 on that.
But you would.
No, I wouldn't.
Can you really put a price on Mega Force?
Yes.
That's true. Can you really put a price on
Autographed
that?
bootleg?
Can you really? Yeah, you're right, Jim. Can you really?
In a
put
perfect
price
world,
on
I
it?
would have loved to have seen with all the different sub teams that they did. If somehow they had gotten the rights to do a Mega Force as a proper GI Joe sub team, like they did with so many of the other things, that would have been better than going to space or Python Patrol, in my opinion.
No, Mega Force in space. You can't beat that.
Ooh.
I think somebody's got to give Matthew LaCroix a call and see whether he's willing to do a customized Ace Hunter.
Oh my God. Yeah, if anyone could do it, he
That would
could.
be your guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his stuff.
Well,
is
what is it? What is it? Who is it? Eagle Force?
Yeah,
It's
Fresh
on-
Eagle
Monkey-
Force.
Fresh
They're
Monkey
coming out with
Fiction
an
did.
Ace Hunter, calling it Maverick.
Oh, okay.
Is that part of the 4-inch line?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
the 4-inch line, I believe, the Eagle Force line. So they have.
I think they're calling it like Mega Force. Is there or not Mega Force? What was it? They had a slight change to the name, but yeah, it's got
Yeah.
the gold suit and the whole
Yep, yep.
design. It's
They have a-
obvious what it's an homage to.
There's about like 3 or 4 different figures from Megaforce in there.
Oh, nice. About time.
Yeah, about time.
Yeah, Fresh Monkey Fiction's been doing some cheeky stuff with their 4-inch line. They've got
Mm.
kind of their homage to, they've got the big
Listen,
Trouble
I'm
in
just
Little
waiting
China
for
character
this.
and-
This is the technology I'm waiting for. Just like a character creator on a video game, you just go in there, you change around all the options, right? Then you just hit print, and
Oh my
that
God.
sucker pops right out on your 3D printer, and you've got your action.
Hold on,
figure.
the entire Megaforce collection myself.
Yeah. Because there was like even back, I think as far back as like Nintendo 64. Now maybe not Nintendo 64, but some of the wrestling games had such robust character creators that you could make. I remember people making. I think there was one of the wrestling games. Some guy like made Optimus Prime. Like you could change
Wow.
things so much. He made a wrestler that looked like Optimus Prime, and I would catch videos or screenshots of it. But that's the technology we need. Character creator.
We're
Anything
probably
you can-
getting to that point though. Like I don't think it's going to be too long before people just have like big home workshops that they're set up kind of like Gridiron. Like Mark showed a little bit of what he and Quaid and his other boy were working on. But imagine that, but like leveled up another 10 or 15 years with technology, and instead, now you're assembling the toys in house, right? Though I guess paint will always be an issue. That's going to be a problem.
Paint would be an issue, and I guess because the level of quality of paint jobs is going to be
Well, it's like-
always some-
Yeah, it's like Michael French always says, the fans are doing the best work. You see these guys that are like, well, they're not making what I want. Well, I'll make it myself, and they do some cool stuff out there.
That's where Stan Solo comes in and Pro Customs
Yep,
and all that.
yep.
All right,
Right.
you guys sold me. I'm gonna go get a 3D printer and make my own. Megaforce toys.
We're doing it. Megaforce, yes.
Yeah, here it
The
goes.
master, yes.
Anybody on
I
board?
mean, I would love to if I had the talent to do it. And that's the one thing about like the digital world is one person with that skill and the talent to do it by hand. You'd have to sculpt it and copy it and everything. But once that image is up there, or that file is up there, then some nerd like me could take it and just print it out. You could do it, or you could buy just the files.
Hey, Palatoy AF3 Jeep. I think that's the SAS Panther. Is it? So I saw that yesterday at the toy show for 400 Canadian, and which again is about 310 or so US. And I can still call the guy who has it, and it was all complete and everything. Little tempting, but I wasn't. When you're not quite ready, where you're like, I have some SAS figures, I have some Action Force, but that's a deeper plunge than I wanted
think
to take. at
The
the time.
AF3 was before they brought over the Hasbro
Yeah,
Vamp
yeah.
style.
Yeah,
It was
was.
a Palatoy original,
Yeah, was
and
the one
it
with the
had.
boat? The boat.
Oh, so
outside?
so
Right,
this
has
wasn't the SAS.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
the
Yeah,
roll
yeah. He
cage
says right now they're
boat.
different vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
right.
Panther.
With
So
the
like I said-
AF3, the roof could become like a patrol boat, and the stiff-legged figures that Palatoy originally did, the 5 POA, could fit in there easier. Whereas with the SAS Panther, you really needed the newer Hasbro style O-ring figure.
Absolutely to sit properly. Yeah, there's still a lot of gaps in my Action Force knowledge, so I don't know why I transposed the AF3 to the SAS Panther.
There's only
So.
one. There's only one Action Force figure you need to know about, and that's Space Commander.
That's true. As
the only one
your
you
friend
need for it,
Space
yeah.
Commander will tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the important one. That's the only one you need.
Yeah, I finally convinced him to come on another channel that wasn't Slaughterhouse just for a quick 20-second clip there. I think he's still hesitant to go live on here, but he's like, you know what? I'll give you this snippet of information. For those who haven't seen my latest video drop there, where Space Commander gives me heck for not having a Space Commander figure. But I bought one after we met, like in the time between that video dropping and when we first met on the Slaughterhouse. Welcome to the Slaughterhouse. I managed to pick one up, and it's a true story. I subliminally just clicked buy it, not really thinking why or looking back at the lore. And when it arrived in the mail, I'm like, so why did I? Oh, right, I bought this because subliminally this guy's been brainwashing me over the past
That's right.
less than
Now
a
you
year
just
now.
need the
Technology
official
on that
Space
space
Commander
station.
cap, and you'll be set.
And the Viper that I bought, I didn't realize at the time it was a Space Force thing, because 4 years ago I wasn't familiar with all the Action Force sub teams, right? So, and then later on, the guy who made that, the Red Lasers Army guy, told me that's actually Space Force. Look at the logo. I'm like, oh my goodness, it is, right? So, yeah.
Serendipity.
Stargrove in the comments, he had an interesting little thing there. He said, "Not gonna lie, if I could go back, I would never watch the Transformers show or read the comic. I would just change. If I could change the past, I would rather just have the toys in my imagination." And going to like the origins of toy lines, Jim brought it up earlier. GI Joe or the Diaclone and everything was kind of really just that. You had minimal prompts. You had, sometimes on the Big Jim or GI Joe, you would have like he's got all the equipment to do a jungle exploration or something, and then the rest was up to you. So they would start you with a prompt, and then the rest was up to your imagination. Do you think that? So my question, my point there was, because in a lot of cases, I did just I had a toy, I kind of knew a little bit about him, and I would make up my own story. And those are some of the most fun times I had playing with my toys. So do you think that, toy companies maybe should dial it back a little bit, give us some kind of prompts and not, write the entire story where you're recreating the movie beat for beat, but kind of give you that thing? Or do you think that has helped with kids' imaginations and play, or retaining those, the play and everything like that? Because, if we all have a movie we could agree on, we could have shared experiences, other than all of us having our own unique experiences with the toys. You know what I mean?
I think for the main character, you're probably right, but there's a lot of times where the story draws me into a deeper character, like a character who's a bit of a deep cut. Like if you look at like Masters of the Universe, the Eternia, like Keklar is a deep cut character, but then people say, "Ooh, wasn't he in the original mini comic? Now I want to go look." Same thing with the Eternian Green Goddess, right? And speaking of deep cut and canon, look who decided to show up. Peppermint Oil Capsule, part of the Space Commander extended crew. Thank you for the British Pounds super chat there. Says he'll catch the replay. I'm not sure if he caught us gossiping about him before he jumped on, or if he's just, as he listens to me respond right now, going, what were you saying about me? And he frantically rewinds about 5 minutes to find out how he subliminally got me to buy a Space Commander figure. For
like
the Toy
in the
Connection
South,
collection.
his ears might have been burning. He might have heard something.
Or somebody messaged him saying, "Hey, Ken's talking trash about you right now about that video yesterday," and he shows up and is such a nice guy. He donates a few pounds instead. So, yeah. All right.
As to the question though, I always, even as a kid, I used whatever media I consumed, like GI Joe, for instance. I just used that as a stepping point. My adventures always went off into a different direction anyway. So I think today, with kids, I mean, if they are playing, the ones that are playing with actual toys, not just video games and stuff, I think maybe it could be the same way, where they just use it as a stepping point, because usually kids have their own imagination when they play with a toy. You give them like a Dino Rider and it could turn into Godzilla stomping down Matchbox cars.
Yeah, I mean, we would just pick up a stick and it would become a sword, a gun, whatever you wanted it to be.
Multi-tool.
We didn't need much, prompting.
Storyline definitely can enhance play, but I remember as a kid, I would get, you'd always have that aunt or uncle that would give you the birthday toy, and it's like, this is not a line I collect. I don't know what this character is, but I'll make him fit.
Yeah.
So I had like some of the Mego Black Hole figures. I hadn't seen the film, but they're cool figures, and they looked like G.I. Joe in the design, so they became part of the play, and I created my own characters around them.
I got to tell you, if I got a character and he looked kind of like derpy, just weird looking, I'd just make him a bad guy. And it had nothing to do with the character. I didn't know his story. I was just like, I don't like the look on his face. He's a bad guy. I just put him in that lot, just for no good reason at all. So,
That's
yeah,
funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just wondering if it's like, is it? Do you think it's an enhancement? You know, because in the '70s and '60s and '70s, there really wasn't that much direction given to children. You know, when they played with that. So, you know, does that help the longevity of the toy line? Because you know, GI Joe was GI Joe for 2 decades. It was just GI Joe. You know, different outfits, different playsets came back. Things maybe were recycled and brought back. But if you look at GI Joe, Real American Hero, you know that didn't make it. It's persisted, but you know the initial line was to '92 or '93.
Well, if you look at GI Joe and you have the cartoon, and mostly everybody you talk to have their own Joe verse, their own universe that if you go into it. So I think I think it's not the longevity of the line itself beyond the product.
Mm-hmm. Are you getting a bit of an echo here?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. At TJC, I think it might be on your mic.
Have a look.
Yeah, because I'm seeing your bubble light up a little bit when I talk as well. So, anyway. Oop.
You might have to mute the stream that you're watching in order to.
Yeah.
That's it.
Any
And
better?
just listen to StreamYard. Test?
Any better?
Feedback? Still hear a little bit. Still hear myself a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear Ken
Very
again.
double.
I can hear Ken again.
Yeah. Are you muted? Like, is your StreamYard? Sorry, is your YouTube muted and your StreamYard is the only thing that's on?
Yeah, StreamYard's the only thing I got on.
Yeah, it could be that. Do you have like a pair of earbuds, like a mic?
Not on
That might
me.
work better.
It could be
Because-
that if you have your
Yeah,
computer.
you might be talking into a computer, and then you're hearing the speakers come back out, and it's going back into the mic and creating this recursive loop.
I'm actually on my phone this time. That's probably what it is.
Okay. All right. Maybe just mute yourself when you're not talking then or something. Oh, testing. Did that work? I don't hear myself anymore.
Oh, he's gone.
Hey Ken, if
Yeah.
you go into his settings, I bet you he just has something
might-
turned on where you have to like the echo or feedback. You
Yeah.
can turn it off for him. When he comes
Okay.
back in.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh, you're welcome to come back in, TJC. I didn't. Oh, there we go. He's back.
I'll be right back.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm gonna go to your mic and I'm gonna see if I can do a echo cancellation for you. Testing. Okay, looks like I've got your echo cancellation on, TJC. I think you're good now. Thank you for that, Ryan. I completely forgot about that option in StreamYard, but I have seen it. We're good now?
All good.
Well, welcome for the first time to Toy Connections channel, TJC and Jim Largo, both channel members. If anybody wants to join the channel membership or the Patreon, these gentlemen can tell you how annoying it is to hear me banter in the background or put up channel-only things. Or if you just want Ralph emojis,
I'm only here for the Ralph
Toy
emojis.
Connections
That's it.
Patreon changed my life for the better. It could change yours too.
Did it? I'm very flattered that you said that, Will.
I
I'm
will
not
say I have
sponsored by
learned much
Clamato.
more about wrestling lore since I've been watching Ken than I ever knew as a kid. I just used to watch the guys get on, Saturday on the TV and wrestle. But now I know, a lot more about the storylines and who was with who and who was working what contract. It's cool.
Now
and
we
next
drag him deeper down that rabbit hole.
Well, that's the thing, right? And I kicked the idea to Ryan yesterday. I don't know if Gazz, if I sent it to all of our chat, but I'm actually kicking the idea around to doing a Survivor Series 35th anniversary stream next week, because next week is 35 years to the day of the very first Survivor Series. And we could go on some memories or something like that about, Montreal screw jobs and whatnot. But I do notice that the wrestling crowd can differ a little bit from the usual toy crowd. And speaking of expanding the crowd, I think you folks sold them on it. Smoked Ham, welcome to the Toy Connections channel membership. If you check your tab and you want to come in and join the stream, you're welcome to, and hop onto StreamYard. You'll see a link there in the channel members tab. I posted it in 2 places. I posted it in the Patreon and the channel members tab. I notice though that this is a good thing while the channel's still small-ish, because you're only allowed 10 cameras on screen. So if the channel gets bigger, touch wood, not saying I'm gonna let it get to my head, you start running out of room on the screen. And not only do you run out of room, StreamYard starts saying you have too many people on, kick somebody out, right? And I'll be happy to kick myself out, but that's only an interim measure as well, right? Because I like to reward the members and patrons as well.
You do have to deal with that problem someday. I think it'd be a good problem to have.
It'd be a good problem to have because, then
you'd have to form Toy Connection subgroups.
Sub-factions. Sub factions, right? Like
we'll have our own sub teams, like
Megaforce.
The Action Force.
I'm on Megaforce.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna
Action Force.
There we go.
Yep.
And Action Force may have to split into like Z Force and all that.
I just appreciate the opportunity, Ken, to be able to see you face to face and hang out because I enjoy it,
we talk so often on Instagram. I never even thought like, what does this guy sound like? What does he look like? Even though technically
like
I've seen you, I've seen you a little bit on Will's channel because I do remember seeing Will stream you on there, but I remember also seeing it very briefly and having to go probably do something wrestling related. But subscribe to Wilhelm Toy and Hobby. Subscribe to the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors, even though Ryan doesn't want to get over 100 subscribers, but let's get him over that 100 anyway. Or are you over 100 now, Ryan? You were at 97.
No, I keep making people mad, so I'm still at like 97, so I'm good.
On purpose or just in general?
Yeah, my original goal was to have like nobody sub, and I would tell people, don't subscribe, don't like, just, catch me when you can, just for the pure enjoyment of, it was just guys hanging out. So
yeah,
but,
just an outlet.
I've known Jim since the Infinity Equation, like what, 2+ years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to finally see Jim in real life, and I know Chris would say hi to you as well too. So
Chris is a great guy. He's had his ups and downs, but I love him. And it's so fun to be in this kind of community. I'm an expat who lives in Guatemala, so I don't have a lot of neighbors who talk toys or enjoy the things we do. But with the magic of the internet and the interwebs, we can meet with people from all over the place. And getting to know people like Zazel and Ken and some of the other folks that are out there, no matter where they are. It's like we all have a certain love for the nostalgia and the things we enjoyed, and some of the new products too.
My real life friends are saying that I've been ignoring them because I used to have time to go out and like drink or something on a Saturday night. But if I'm doing a stream Sunday morning, I'm like, I probably won't. Right. That's actually why this stream started 30 minutes later, because I was at a toy show all day yesterday, then watched the AEW pay-per-view, didn't get home till late. I'm like, I want to sleep in an extra 30 minutes.
I was thankful for that because another one of Will and I's mutual friends you guys might know is Bill, who does Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures.
I've seen the name a lot of times, actually.
He's another one that we've met in the chats, and he loves a lot of the vintage Masters of the Universe and some of the older 60s and 70s type toys. And he's also an amateur magician, so he'll do some card tricks and sleight of hand bits here and there. So he kept me up really late last night, so I was like, I'm glad Ken's not starting early today.
Yeah, as I usually say, like, it's not my preferred time. Like, if I could, I'd like to go on at like 2 p.m. on a Saturday, because those of you like TJC, what time is it where you are right now?
7 p.m. where I am right now.
7 p.m. So you're usually what's that, about 8 hours ahead of me, right? So if I start at 2 on a Saturday, you might not be asleep yet, and if you are thinking about it, you're like, well, tomorrow's Sunday, right? And then people over in like the Australia area, they're just waking up. So in a perfect world, I do 2 p.m. my time Saturday on the West Coast, or 5 p.m. East Coast every week if I could do TKO then. But, family expects me to do things at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Therefore, I got no choice, right?
Time zones trip me up.
Sunday night here, and it's obviously getting my boy ready for bed, and obviously school tomorrow and all that business.
That's right. Because it's it's Sunday right now, right? And for people who are in like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, those parts of the world, it's Monday morning for them, right? So like I kind of feel bad that Zazel, Phil, Brendan Haley, Johnny Sorensen, a lot of these folks have to catch the replay and like never get really a chance to come on. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. Anyway, you got a fan in the chat there, TJC.
Yeah, I was up late too, Ken, because I finally
Fellow
finished.
East Anglian.
Oh, a
Yes,
nice,
I'm gonna
Cobra
I'm gonna
throne.
full screen you. Hold that pose.
How
Look
long
at
did
that.
that take?
What a perfect throne for Cobra Commander.
Yeah.
No,
Nice.
Is it a 30-hour print? What is
Not for
it?
that clone
Yeah.
guy right there, is it?
4-hour print.
Oh no,
It's gonna
not
be for this
Serpentor.
big
Ooh.
What a beautiful looking action figure. Holy crud.
They did a great job.
They did. I'm regretting that I didn't get one.
Oh, is it still possible to get one, Gaz?
I don't
For
know.
you?
It probably will be. I don't know.
Okay.
As a great YouTuber says, plastic will find a way. and if I'm gonna get one, I'll get one. But for right now, all hail Cobra Commander, the great snake rules forever.
Yes. There was one yesterday at the toy show I could have grabbed for you, Gaz.
Sorry. No worries.
In fact, the guy helping me, Rick, one of the guys helping me at my table, had one there. And he's like, if I'm helping you, can I put some stuff up? I'm like, sure. He's got a Serpentor. I'm like, damn it, mine's still in the mail. Like, it's literally on the way here, and you're holding it there. And the Mindbender, which is in the mail, is all there too. So
speaking of this community and your offer there, I want to throw a shout out to Matthew Comstock, man. That guy sent me Outback, Tiger Force Outback,
Cool.
which Target canceled my order.
yeah.
And the guy said, I got an extra one. I'll just send it over to you.
I was thinking the original, not the
The
classified, but
name's
still an awesome figure.
familiar.
Swordsman.
Yeah.
Swordsman. I think Swordsman 007. I think that's
Yes, Alias Swordsman
Yeah.
007, yes.
Yeah, that's
I
another
was-
great thing about this community is the idea that one guy's got something here, or we're in
Yep.
different markets. So if I can find it in a shop and I can grab a one for my buddy and send it on in the mail, this is just another cool bonus to being able to hang out like this.
it makes you feel good. It's like
Yeah.
the generosity, the niceness, just people being cool. So yeah, I want to throw out a thank you to Matthew. It's very kind of him to do that.
Matthew's a good guy. I love talking to him on Instagram there. I know he's on Discord sometimes as well.
He's got a great blog.
He does. Joe Restored. In fact, he might watch this later, so we should mention Joe Restored.
Yeah.
This,
I guess
yes.
the name just sounds familiar, and it's possibly from Instagram or one of the Facebook groups or something.
Oh, he's also a patron here. That's
Oh,
probably
okay.
where you saw his name. Like I
I'm
probably
seeing
welcomed
chat,
welcomed him.
or if you're
to
on Joe Berg,
Yeah,
we're
he's
Joe Berg. Yep. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of folks I'll see in different chats for these different YouTube videos, and it's like I know that name from somewhere, and it's like, oh yeah, because we were just watching this other show with this other guy, and then Iconicon just blew that up, with seeing all these channels come together and crossing the streams, and then you meet so many different people in the chat. It's like, man, yeah, there's all these great channels out here doing cool stuff.
That might have been how you discovered me, Jim, was through Iconicon, I think. So
I think it was kind of that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing. It's like I was watching Iconicon. I met Grindhead Jim. Grindhead Jim introduced me to Toy Connections, and then Analog and all the other stuff. It's like you can't remember exactly who introduced who, but it's like, yeah, we're all just kind of in the same mindset when it comes to toy collecting and just having fun and not getting into the drama. It's like you kind of, we have a subgroup of collectors
This
who are
year
like,
has been great for me in the sense that I think just a couple of years ago there's a lot of crap on all social media, but I set out I wanted to flood all of my streams with so much toy content that I wouldn't see any of the other stuff. And
stick to the positive.
This year I was able to achieve a subscription. When I click on my subscriptions, there's toy videos for. I mean, I don't have enough time to watch them all, and that's the great thing, is that sometimes I miss some because I don't have enough time, and that's the level where I want it to be, and I achieved that this year.
Sure, I can't remember
Absolutely.
last time I sat down and watched regular television. It's like it's more fun to watch these guys, see what they're up to.
yeah, well, House of the Dragon got me back, as did Cobra Kai. Otherwise, I'd be on YouTube all the time. So sometimes there's always that one show that'll get you. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah. It's just great to have all of you on here at this point in time because I see you folks in the comments. Some of you have been on streams before. Some of you I've actually just met on other streams. Some of you I only talk to on Instagram. So just to get this kind of human interaction now, and however many of you will be at Joe Fest next year, that'll be another place to potentially meet up.
That would be cool. Logistics were tough. I wanted to go last year, but with all the COVID restrictions and stuff, international flights were not easy. Maybe this year will be easier.
Hopefully. So I'm just responding Pure Wrestling TV. I haven't heard of those wrestling figures before, because he's saying, have I heard of some of the early Japan wrestling figures? And I'm like, I don't actually know about those. Yes. And, do we need to ban somebody in the chat?
Yes,
we need to ban somebody.
because forget this toy stuff. There's new dating for all tastes and ages.
That's right. You've arrived, Ken, when you start getting these kind of bots.
Yeah.
That means
I'm gonna have to go over there now, guys. Sorry.
Have you noticed I've been getting those bots every stream lately? Like, it's either, I think Gazz banned one last week, and I think Scuba Pete may have banned one the week before. I think Ryan, Jody told me he's had to ban bots from the chat before too. Like when he's been able to come on.
It's kind of like an offhanded compliment, because if the bots are on, it means you're popular and people are watching your content.
Yeah. So Peppermint, Zazel's alt channel.
Oh, he's you'll be hearing from Zazel when he wakes up, and I think he sometimes listens to these TKO streams on the way to work, so you'll be hearing from him soon for that comment.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, like I said, Payne said it's nice to be part of this community. It allows me to be less isolated. Yeah. And it allows me to speak to people that speak my language. You guys are interested in the same things I'm into. So it's, I'll talk people's ears off, my family, and they politely listen to me, but they don't care as much as you guys do about what I have to say about toys.
At least they politely listen. Sometimes I just see the zone out in the eyes, like, is he done yet?
It's that awkward moment when they mention, like, when somebody, like, they're at work or something and they mention, like, oh, I dig Voltron, and then you just go into this whole spiel about Voltron and you on their face, and you're like, oh great, oh I'm sorry, I'll see you later.
I did it again. Yeah. I just regurgitated 3 decades of Voltron knowledge.
Of pent up information that I've been needed to offload to somebody.
Some poor guy only watched a couple of episodes of the cartoon, and you're giving him the whole lore and where it was manufactured and what LJN did, and they're like, "What's LJN? I don't
know." That's amazing.
So Space Commander mentioned something about Knight Rider being on TV.
Oh yeah. Sorry,
TV in England.
I missed that because we were busy getting rid of spam bots.
Oh,
is this a new Knight Rider series, or what? Wait, it is something. I saw something. I saw an ad or on one of the streaming services, that Knight Rider movie where they put him into they brought back David Hasselhoff and
Knight Rider 2000.
The one with the red car,
it's like a
the
Mustang
red car
instead of the Trans Am, and it's sort of auto playing because like if you pause on something for too long, it just starts playing, and the dialogue was horrible.
The Mustang was the remake, wasn't it?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. The Mustang there was no Hoff
voice.
I had Val Kilmer as the voice of Kit, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow.
I wonder if you have Knight Rider on your search. I wonder if like Baywatch will suddenly like autoplay in the background or something like.
I don't know, but I'm watching Magnum PI on free TV on on Amazon, and I'm just in the first season, and I'm like maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, and when it starts off, it gets me because it's not the theme song. It's like this instrumental, like orchestra theme song, like a generic type of 80s show.
Is it because like they don't have the rights?
No, it's not the cool guitar play that it starts off.
Yeah.
But then in the show itself, you hear the known theme song play throughout the show, and then at the end, and I'm like, this isn't setting right with me. This is weird.
That's peculiar,
isn't it? Right?
It didn't make that change, I think, until season 2. Gazz.
I believe so. Yeah, But I'm
because
just
they
saying,
didn't think it was.
it
They
throws
didn't
you
think it
off.
was going to last.
Oh, I know.
Here's an interesting, guys. Does it hold up? Does the show hold up? Because you
I
go
think
back
it
and
does.
watch a show, and sometimes they're just not.
I think it does. I think the way that, well, at least for Magnum, the way it's done, because he's like kind of like telling the story as it's playing out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he breaks the fourth wall like all the time. He's always looking at the camera. He's always doing like these little smirks and stuff. So it's like, yeah. So I think it holds up. Personally,
the way he
myself.
played off of the gentleman who played Higgins, he gave him the straight lines and the two would bounce off. That really worked.
It was a good show.
That's one of those Grail pieces. I think Mego actually made a Magnum PI action figure with the
I've
with
seen
the car.
pictures of it, and I thought it was fake because
no, I think it's a real thing.
No, I know
it was
because it's
very limited.
So rarely seen that I thought someone made a modern recreation and then tried to pass it off as like a big
right. Mego had this thing where when they were trying to, after they'd gone away from the 8-inch and went to the smaller scale, they were gobbling up any kind of TV license. They had the Dukes of Hazzard, they had Greatest
Planet of
American
the
Hero
Apes.
for a second, Planet of the Apes.
I've seen the Chips figures, so if there's Chips figures, there's a Magnum. There has to be one.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the question is there a Simon and Simon one so that you can do the crossover?
Ooh, that'd be
No, there wasn't a Simon and Simon, but there was a Hardcastle and McCormick.
Damn.
Yeah,
I was going to say that. Yeah, I used to love that show, but I could never find the car anywhere.
Right. I don't know if you guys ever saw the old show Riptide, but I always wanted the big pink screaming Mimi helicopters. Like, give me that.
Yeah. Who was in that? Joe Penny was in that.
Hey,
Right?
Gojatron. I see him in the chat. He said, "Did someone say Mego?"
Oh, he's definitely a Mego aficionado. Yeah, Goji's another one who's just a wealth of lore and knowledge, whether it's comics or classic toys. I love watching his stuff. And it's another one that by getting to know some of you guys in the chat, they're like, "Have you seen Gojitron's channel?" It's like, well, check it out.
Yeah, it's refreshing when someone just does a me on me, because I talk to normal people all the time and I'm telling them all these facts, But then when someone like tells me, like schools me on like a subject, I love it because it doesn't usually happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like with Ryan. He knows so much about all the classic G.I. Joe stuff. I love listening to when he gets in with some other guys in a heated discussion. It's like, you go, man, you tell him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have that combative personality at times. It can get bad, but it's something when you care about it, and
sure,
toys are fun.
Yes,
and toys aren't what makes all of this great. It's all of you. That's what it's all about. It's about playing with your friends again. And toys,
it's great to have that passion and enjoyment and camaraderie.
Yeah, and some of the best times when you were kids is when you guys would think up your own crazy adventures, play them out with your toys, and you would spend the day doing it, and you would get home and you're like, that was just so much fun. We got to do it again. And those are the memories that you carry with you for the rest of your life. It's not, I've got this Men on Cart Snake Eyes version too with the great tip. No, it's this Snake Eyes and we went everywhere together. That's what makes it great.
Yeah, that's the good old days when you could get together with the neighborhood guys and have a knockdown, drag out fight in the creek with your action figures, and then it's like, I'll see you tomorrow. I got to go home. Mom's yelling for supper.
That's how I felt about my Tommy the White Ranger and Green Ranger figures. I took those figures everywhere, and like today, still processing Jason David Frank's passing. Right, like it's hard. It's hard right now.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm glad you folks are here on screen. Like it's
it was past my time for that. I was out of the game, and I was obviously aware of the popularity of Power Rangers, but never really got into it. But no, I could definitely appreciate how you're feeling right now, Ken, and
Kevin Conroy just last week, right? I mean,
Kevin Conroy hit hard.
To know that they just won't be here anymore is the part that there'll never be another Batman voiced by Kevin Conroy, or there'll never be another Green Ranger I don't know how many times they've gone back to it, or if these guys have ever, they've just been doing conventions since the show, or have
No,
they?
Ranger stuff
he's
is
come
kind of
back for guest
fascinating.
appearance.
He's come
Yeah, I was
back,
gonna
and
say.
just the fact that he can't do that, or you're not going to see that anymore. And once again,
Right.
also the circumstances in which we lose people like this, it puts things into perspective for you as well. Just that you can't imagine what would drive someone to that, and and you wish and you hope that there's something someone could have said or done, or just to change those things, but it's definitely tough to absorb that this happened.
Yeah. Well, the best thing you can do is celebrate the work they did and enjoy that, and just be aware. And if you got a friend that's maybe not doing so well, talk to them or let them know they're not alone. Ken, I don't know much about Power Rangers. I've of course seen it here and there, but I was a little older when it came out, so I wasn't into it. But the fascinating thing is when you look at some of the original Japanese
The Sentai,
television
yeah.
shows that they borrowed
Sentai.
from.
Yep.
And I saw one that was Spider-Man. I'm like, what? Japanese Spider-Man? No way.
Mhm.
And then he has his own Megazord and all kinds of stuff. But with the Power Rangers, it's like they borrowed from several different series and somehow did a mashup and made it work in the American market, and then found
Yep.
American actors
Yep.
to do the out of costume scenes. And that's where
That's
you get,
right.
some of these great actors that did the, I remember the Mighty Morphing stuff. And then I remember the Green Ranger kind of showed up, and then he was the White Ranger, and then something else
Yep.
happened. And I kind of lost the story from there. But it's,
Yeah, then they got the Zeo Crystal, got called Power Rangers Zeo, then Turbo, then they went into space with a new cast, and then they were supposed to stop the series, but then space got so popular they continued it and Lost Galaxy, so on and so forth. I go to about 99, and then I watch on and off again until 2006.
now,
And then
did they
I'm out
start
after
making original
2006.
content, or were they still borrowing from Japanese series? And then
From
just
when I
adding-
was watching, it was all borrowing from original, like from Japan, and it made it a little bit interesting because, like, when they borrowed from Mega Ranger, from Super Sentai Mega Ranger, for Power Rangers in space, the Black Ranger was the leader, but the Red Ranger had this like solo mission Wolverine thing going. So how they adapted that over here was like, okay, well, how do we do this? Because the Red Ranger is our leader, but the character is very different. In Mega Ranger, they had to cut the footage a certain way and made sure that the out of costume appearances were done a certain way. It was quite different. So yeah, I'm not sure if they eventually started making entirely their own footage. But I do know that in the years I was watching, they were still pulling from Sentai.
This is a great premise. For me, it reminded me a lot of one of my favorite things from growing up was, in America, we called it Battle of the Planets, but of course it was Gatchaman in Japan,
Yes.
or with the G agents. And I loved that show as a kid. G-Force, yeah.
Yeah.
So
G-Force,
each had
yeah.
a cool vehicle. They each had a cool bird motif. And it's like, I saw Power Rangers, like, that reminds me of that. That's cool. That's another one I'd love to see as a new resurgence of an action line. I think Storm Collectibles has just, I think last year they solicited Ken the Eagle, the G1, in their line. So hopefully they'll do all of them, but you never know.
See, I'm waiting for a resurgence in the super robots from the 70s. Grandizer, Guy King, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's
What we
what I'm
called
waiting
the
for.
Shogun Warriors, the
Oh,
great big
yeah.
guys.
Ooh.
Those were awesome. The
Force
Flying
5.
Fists.
Yep. I'm waiting for that to come back. That would be, I'd be in heaven.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yes,
Bandai
this is
has
why
been
I was
putting out. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I get in an argument with Ken about this because I think we're in the golden age of toys now, not back in the 80s. Just because of the fact you have so many smaller companies that can make these obscure lines, where we didn't have that in the 80s because, look, Mattel and Hasbro, they can't make obscure lines because you can't produce them in such small quantities and sell them. But, like Valaverse or Roboskull, Skeletron, they can make those type of things. And even Monster Force now with like Fresh Monkey Fiction.
Yeah.
They can make these smaller lines and make them available to collectors, which we've never had that before. And then you've got like Gridiron and Mark II Design where you can customize your figures now too. As 10-year-olds back in the day, if we had a place where we could go and get whatever weapons we wanted, game over.
Yeah, we have the best, engineering and articulation, the face print technology that we have now. So we're getting the best quality of some of our nostalgic brands and some new stuff. I saw what is it Fresh Monkey Fiction that's making this Monster Force? I remember seeing that on BBTS this week. Those are amazing. I love the concept, and again, the storyline behind it is really cool. And it fits with. It is 1/12 scale, so it fits with my Action Force and the classified guys. So I'm happy.
So with regards to that Golden Age thing, I actually was on here on a pre-recorded stream with Adam from Go Figure and Zazel from Slaughterhouse, and I said, I think we're the Golden Age now. And they both said, no. We had to laugh a little bit. And then I went back and looked at it again, and that's when I did my whole, I think the Golden Age was from 1978 to 1994 video, because that was start of Star Wars to end of Ara and the rise of Power Rangers. And then I started saying, I think the age we live in now, you can call it a golden age if you like, but I think it's a renaissance boom, because it's about artisan space, advanced levels of critical thinking. And when the fan, whether it's Valiverse or Fresh Monkey Fiction or Robo Skull or anyone else, when the fan becomes the creator, I call it a renaissance. You can say it's golden times again, but I like the word renaissance better for today's era. I don't know how you feel.
The 80s was the golden age of marketing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you
That's
that.
what drove everything.
When the restrictions were taken off, and suddenly you had cartoons that were basically a long commercial, and then you had G.I. Joe the cereal, G.I. Joe the underwear, G.I. Joe the toilet paper, whatever.
and at that point too, in the States especially, you had we were coming out of the 70s recessions. People had money again, and your kids, you could go to the store and get toys that were still cheap to keep your kids happy. And that's where you became more of the consumer economy, at least here in the States, because of the marketing, the collect them all. The golden age was the marketing aspect, but I think right now, if you're looking at golden age, it's creators and what you're seeing now. And there's more smaller creators that are creating some of these action figure lines. Marauders, Boss Fight Studios, Super 7. You can just keep going on and on and on about all these different folks who are making some pretty crazy stuff. So
I think
that's why
a few years there were. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's all true, but it's all based on, like, if the 80s or late 70s through the 90s didn't happen, then we wouldn't be in this age now. Like, we owe it to the products of the past, or the marketing, that golden age of marketing, that kind of drove the industry to where it is now.
I feel like we went through kind of an era of everybody had their nostalgia goggles on. So we're all looking at, what made us feel good in the 70s and 80s. And that was the only thing that manufacturers were focused on. But now we're starting to see more creative new IPs, like this Monster Force idea, or what Valiverse did with reimagining Action Force. Some other lines where they're saying, we don't just have to look at the nostalgia. We can do something new again.
Yeah. Like I said, artisan creative space. Like, that's why I know you support a lot of the small lines there, like Jim. Because doesn't Grindhead and his partner Rolo, don't they have? You can talk a bit about that if you want. On
Resurrection Toys.
There you go. You got a sample right there.
If you're a fan of the old Japanese vinyl monster toys or kaiju, these are fun. They're made in Mexico, but they're an homage. This particular one is a favorite of mine because it's a mashup between Godzilla and the classic Alien.
Yeah.
And he's just a fun desk buddy. And if I can get him to work, one of the things about Mexican bootleg toys is they love to put lights in them. So he doesn't like to stay lit up, but they have.
And they're making them in Mexico. Like, they're not doing them in China, which is interesting.
Well, again, the artisans, they have a great sculptor by the name of Marcos, who is down there, and our friend Rolo, who is kind of the mark. There's a light. They love to put lights and stuff. So
that's awesome.
He's got some disco strobe, when I want to have the.
We're talking a kaiju-sized alien. That's nuts.
Yeah. And these guys are, they're lovers of kaiju and monsters and fun stuff. And now they're kind of branching out into some stuff that is, like Lucha Libre, which is very popular in Mexico, having the Mexican wrestlers. And it's just about having fun. because down there
They
licenses
love the
are a little bit
lights
more
so
liberal.
much they put them in everything.
They even put him in the Hulk.
Like the bootleg Hulk I got from
Oh,
He's got his gamma ray burst.
yeah, he's got the lights in his chest too.
But for me, it's amazing just the what these guys can do as far as sculpting and art. Some of it, yeah, they're just basically doing homages to things that are, larger companies are doing. But then they kind of make it their own.
I'd love to
the
talk to
paintwork is
Grindhood
good.
Jim and
Oh,
Robo.
yeah,
Sorry
you
to cut you
should.
off there because
No.
when we do Delta 17, we're planning to do production in China, and I'm not sure if can the quantities and the detailing, because it's a different scale of figure, different style, and everything that we're planning to do for Delta 17. Could we, find a way to get it done in Mexico, and would that be easier to get it here? Because they wouldn't have the Chinese New Year shutdown for 6 weeks every year from the beginning of February to the middle of March, right?
Well, like we saw with Valaverse and some other companies when COVID hit, the factory shut down, whether it's Hong Kong or China. You can't get your stuff on a boat. You can't get it to market. With Mexico, there's a lot of guys down there that can do the work. They have the manufacturing for the plastic, and we have the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which I believe includes Canada. So seems like there's some deals to be made. I don't know all the ins and outs, but it's worth looking into.
Yeah, for sure. Well, right now it's just an open forum for you, fine gentlemen. I know we've been going for almost 2 hours here, but if anyone has anything they want to add, anything they want to bring up, anything that's been on their mind, I know we've said a lot here already with our toys and rest in peace from some of our childhood heroes and some of the golden age versus Renaissance, Ryan versus Ken not wanting to be friends anymore, AEW versus WWE, getting TJC and Jim on for the first time, and Megaforce and all that. But like I said, it's open forum for you folks. I should learn to stop babbling and just go to the background.
No. I'm just gonna say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm a motor mouth. I'll run over people, so I'll bow out. And I just want to listen to you guys for a while.
No, don't need to bow out at all. Like, we got a bit more time here. Like, I don't have to stop this at 2 hours. I can keep going a little bit, right? So,
well, I don't know. You might have do you have a honeydew list? That's usually my weekend thing. I get the list from the wife. She's like, this weekend.
But I've already procrastinated because I was at a toy show yesterday. So whatever honeydew list was coming is already doubled in size. So,
oh boy.
Yeah.
All I'll say, Ken, is go to Toy Hacks, and since you got the G.I. Joe headquarters, look at their upgraded decal list for the headquarters, because you'll want to switch it out. It doesn't match up 100% to the original, but it adds more detail, and the stickers are a lot better too.
Yeah,
now, that's a good thing. Is there a big difference between the Action Force headquarters and the original G.I. Joe headquarters? I mean, obviously the paint color, but did they do anything different like they did with the APC?
Oh, sculpt wise, I don't know.
Yeah, they might have a little bit different guns, but everything sculpt wise is pretty much the same.
Because that was an awesome playset. That's one I wish I still had.
Oh, you're talking about specifically the Z Force playset.
No, I never had that one. The G.I. Joe one I had.
The 83,
for a minute. Yeah,
okay.
I had a vintage collection before I moved to Guatemala. I sold everything because it's just, you can't move all that stuff. So now I'm more into the modern. But that was one I really enjoyed.
Yeah, this is my second time owning one. The first time I didn't have the box, and I was just like, I think I want one back. Like I shared it on Instagram earlier on. And oh gosh, I'm trying to pull the screen up right now. I shared it on Instagram earlier on, and I got it yesterday. Box, no instructions. They charged me $250. He charged me 250 Canadian, which is, I don't know what that is, about 180 to 200 US.
It's awesome.
Complete and everything inside. I trust the seller enough. I didn't inspect every last thing, but I know he took very, very good care of it from his old photos. So, it's something I'm glad to own again, but it's another space occupier. I had to shift some things around in my shelving in the garage to get this to fit, but who knows? Future video, maybe. We'll see.
That can be, that's a whole nother rabbit hole in itself, is box art. I'm not an in-box collector, but I love the art on some of these toys, whether it's the classic or the new. They get great artists. They do some great designs and ideas. Sometimes the cover or box art looks better than the toy. Well, probably a lot of times.
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, and if I do the history of GI Joe in 1983, this is going to have to make an appearance in there. So, yeah. Oh, that's right. The wall pieces don't fit super well together.
Ah,
But
See,
that's
what I would do is probably going to hurt people, but I would just cut that front of the box off and just make it into like a wall, put it up in a like a poster holder and put it on the wall. As
if
opposed
you have a box
you
that's
could frame
mangled
it.
already, if you have a
Yeah.
box that's already completely mangled, then it makes sense to do that.
you can even
Right.
afford
Go to
it
3D
mangled.
shows. Carson's got them where you can order those prints.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They'll
Oh,
throw 'em in
wow.
your poster.
But I mean, I got a couple. I'd order a couple of vintage vehicles, a Snowcat and an All Striker, and both boxes were, water damaged. One was water damaged, so I just cut the front of the box off,
Mhm.
put it in a frame, and put it on my wall. Same effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When you go to toy shows, there's always so much going on there that it's like, man, what am I going to pick up? What am I going to pick up? And between this, some of the foreign Joes they had, the original Vamp, the SAS Panther, it was just hard to choose. And you just want to take it all home, but you're like, where's it all going to go? You want to save some funds for other things. It's really hard to prioritize, because you just want it all at the end of the day. And it's not possible, and it's futile, but you do it anyway.
Well, it's even tougher when you collect multiple lines of stuff, like yourself, Ken. Like you have multiple lines, LJN, Transformers, GI Joe. But
Yep.
like me, when I go into
And modern.
in modern, and when I go into a like a vintage show, which I don't really go to, but if I go to a convention or whatever, the only thing I'm really looking for is vintage GI Joes. That's it. I'm not going to look for classifieds because I know that if I buy a classified there, it's going to be like triple the price.
Ouch.
Right.
And that's happened a few times, right? Where they're like, oh, I've got the Arctic Storm Shadow. I want $70 for it because it's hard to get, right?
No, thank you.
So,
But
Yeah.
that leaves me open to things like the last show I went to, a little show called Super Mega Fest, and they had I think it was about a 6 foot tall, not a 6 foot tall, that's about a 3 foot tall Godzilla, rubber body with a metal frame, RC controlled.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, I got to see this. I go, can you open this up? So I can look at it. He's like, yeah. I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm not believing what I'm seeing. And I'm like, how much are you asking for this? And he's like, it's $2,000. I'm like, oh, come on, please.
Wow.
Oh man, what I'm like, I'll never see that again in my life. But oh God, what I wouldn't do for something like that.
That's a great thing about some of these toy shows is the obscure or the unique pieces or pieces you never thought you'd see again. It's like, I don't have a place for it, but I'd love to have it.
It's overwhelming. And, you go to these big conventions. And like I said, the first time I went to one, I think I blew my entire budget in like the first half an hour. And then I was like, all right, you got to get a little focused, Will. Like, so I was like, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Just grabbing stuff left and right. Probably just a bunch of small purchases, nothing huge.
Oh, yeah. We loved when you were showing your Joe Fest footage. You're like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. I took these guys for a ride around the convention, and it was like, it's just overwhelming. So if you can get focused and you have like a list or something you're looking for, it can really help you. Or if you have an unlimited budget, that's even better because then you just get it all.
Well, for me, it's space, the final frontier. I've run out of space, so I have to kind of cycle through. The Marvel Legends, I'm not as in love with, so I've pared it down. Only 70s and 80s classic comic book characters. I'm not doing the MCU stuff anymore. Action Force has taken over that shelf space, and now I've got, the vinyl Japanese toys are kind of trying to fight for space. It's like, something's got to go, so... That's always the thing. It's like something comes in, something else is going to have to be retired to a bin for a little while until I redo the display.
Space is the enemy of us all.
It really is. And then you start looking at family members and you're like, do I need you?
It's like if you move out, that's a whole new toy room. Yeah.
Listen, kid. I know you're only 5, but you got to get out in the real world right now.
Dad's gonna need this space. I need you to move to the basement.
I need this room for my classified flag. Let's go.
Well, that's with when Classified came out, I was into collecting the 4-inch Joes and some vintage vehicles. And you just knew that there was going to be no more 4-inch Joes they were going to make. And I'm like, okay, if I move to Classified, I got to get rid of all the stuff. So my MCU stuff all went, my 4-inch Joes all went, and I just got rid of it all. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to stick to Classified. That's what I'm going to collect. Then Roboskull, and then this, and now I'm like, I need to stop again, take a couple things, and then I'm done, and sell off the rest, and that's what I try to do.
I think Palatoy Action Force is that one line that if I had the funds and money was no object, I would love to collect that line, but I just can't.
Well, and the fact that it's a finite line, that helps. When you're collecting something that's only a few years, it's exactly this is it, and I can make space for it. That helps. Just like Batman the Animated Series, it's not a huge line if you don't get every rainbow flavor of Batman, but you can make a great display. They had a lot of the Rogues Gallery stuff. There's a couple lines like that where it's not a huge line. It doesn't go on forever. And it's attainable. So I've gone through a couple of those cycles, but now I'm more of, do I really like this line? Do I really like the characters? Can I make a display? For me, it's more display now. It's, how do I make these fit? How can I do a diorama? How can I do something to really jazz it up? And a lot of the stuff coming out now is great. And the third-party diorama options or stuff you make yourself or box art, if you cut that out and put it as a background, that works out great. One thing I've been doing lately, again, from my time in Europe, they used to put these out every year. I don't know if you guys have seen these. They're hardcover annuals that they would do in the UK, and they're just reprints of old comic books. And this particular one is, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was popular that year. I think this was 70 or 80. I can't remember what year, but every year they'd put these out, and there's just some great stories, but it's also a great display piece. I can put this in the back of a display. I can put my Spidey and Firestar and Iceman. This is another one I picked up, and they're very inexpensive. You can get these on the Evil Bay or some other places. There's, Tom Baker Doctor Who's for my Doctor Who display. I've got that on the back.
Largo's displays are great. The way he ties everything in together.
That's the fun of it. This one was great. This is another, it's a UK Star Wars, and it's got all the, Empire, imagery. So that looks great with my Black series.
What are these called? What's this line of hardcover?
These are from the UK. One of the London editions limited makes a lot of these. This is one for Batman. And this was 1989, but it's got the classic look of the characters. So that goes with my superpowers. I put that in the background when I do a display.
Specifically the Doctor Who one. Who's behind that one?
Let's see. This was called World Distributors. I'll put that up there. World Distributors. And this is from 1977, which was a special year for me because that was a year I was actually living in Scotland watching Doctor Who on the BBC. And the inside art is a lot of, some of the earlier ones, it's line art and the great stories, some of them little activities and stuff. It's just a fun, kitschy kind of display piece. Here's another nice, you can see some of the artwork.
But it's such a great way to tie everything together and then focus on the display where you have the backdrop and then the figures that, in representation there.
Absolutely.
The way you do that is really great.
Thanks. This one was one of my favorites I just recently picked up.
Ooh, really nice.
1987, when Palatoy was still really embracing Action Force and bringing in the elements of G.I. Joe. So you've got Duke and some of the classics mixed in with I think the Baron Ironblood was still part of the storyline at this point. So you've got a lot of classic stories. And it's got blueprints here. This was the, some of the vehicles. They reprint some of the basic blueprints in here. A lot of fun. So it's not just a display piece. You can also sit and read it and enjoy the stories. But it enhances, a display you do.
That was definitely one thing about the UK Christmas was getting annuals every year as well as the toys.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a big thing. Every year around Christmas time, they would put out these collected editions as hardcover annuals, and they were only.
Did you recently track these down, Largo, or did you?
Some of these
retain
are I've collected over the years, but they're not that hard to pick up. There's a couple of different sellers from the UK that guys that have had them in their garages forever that have just kept them, and you can pick them up for some of these. I think the equivalent of American, maybe $10-15, so totally worth it. And then this one, I know some of you guys have picked this up when it kickstarted.
Yes.
This is such a great resource. Beautiful artwork and an education.
That's my go-to, right?
It is such an education about the O-ring figures and some of the early 5 POA Palatoy stuff.
Well, Jim, we talked a little bit about my my Bombardier video. Some of the photography came directly from that book because I didn't have some of the figures, right? So when I did the Special Weapons Force Bombardier tribute there, it's like that was an excellent resource to fill in some footage that I needed, right? So and there's a part 2 book coming out that Brian, Patty, and David are all putting out. So that should be out later this year or maybe early next year.
Awesome. I wasn't sure if that Kickstarter, if they got everybody together to do the volume 2 or not, but volume 1 is excellent.
Yeah, they did.
Excellent.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's kind of what I look for in a display is it something that, is it something that is collectible in and of itself? Does it enhance the display? That's kind of the mindset.
So you got, I mean, a lot of people here are talking about your showroom and how good it looks there in Guatemala, there, Jim. So I don't know, maybe show us some more photos someday,
Sure.
I know I've seen some on your Instagram before.
Yeah.
My mobile camera is kind of rough, but I'm working on Grindhead. Jim is helping me to kind of move into the technological age because I'm kind of a caveman when it comes to that stuff. But
he's the one who told me to get the microphone that I got, so it's like I was going to buy either a much
pick up the headphones I have now that you so you can hear me and I'm not so glitchy. But yeah, I'd love to do another tour. I'm kind of in the process of remodeling again. I do that every 6 months or so. It's like, okay, everything's full and I've got new stuff coming in, so everything's got to come out and be redesigned and put the shelves up a different way. So it's my OCD just kicks in, and
So how did it work? Did you you retired there after a number of years in the workforce, and you're like, it's easier for me to live in Guatemala. I can just ship things over and I'll have a toy room and a toy space.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those weird journeys. I did some time in the military, then went into the private sector and just got kind of burnt out. Went through a rather nasty divorce, looking for a fresh start. I vacationed in Belize, where they speak English, and mi español is muy mal.
Right.
So enjoyed my time there. And I was into kind of a minimalist thing. It's like, all right, I'm selling my collection. I'm getting rid of everything. If it doesn't fit in a duffel bag and a backpack, I ain't taking it. So I think I kept my Tom Baker and a Superman figure and a handful of my favorites, whatever would fit in the duffel bag. Everything else I sold off. And the taxes here are super cheap. Property taxes like nothing. I was able to buy a house here for a price I could never afford to buy a house in the States at that, and with the investments and retirement things that I have, I can retire here early. I'm 51 and if I was still in the States, I'd still be, grinding away just to work for, 60 or 70 whenever I could hit retirement. But here,
and did you retire just last year, or how early did you retire?
Let's see. I've been here about 5 years now. Because
so you retired young.
I came. I did, and again, it was a fluke where I came on vacation to kind of get my head together, and I met some locals, and then I met the woman who would become my wife, who's actually Guatemalan, even though I met her in Belize, and she's like, Guatemala's pretty nice. I know you don't speak a lot of Spanish, but you don't really have to if you don't want to. I'm like, I'll check it out. And went on vacation and just kind of stayed. It was a hassle when I decided to get back into toy collecting, because at first, the idea of trying to do international shipping, it's like, oh man, this is going to be crazy. But you find workarounds. There's third parties that will do shipping, so I can get things from eBay or Amazon shipped to a warehouse in Miami, and then from there they'll send it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's real easy to find workarounds that work, but sometimes you have to pay a premium for the shipping, or you pay double.
Oh Oh yeah.
So that's a tough one. That also
We talked
factors
about
into your when you're budgeting for your displays and toys. It's like, okay, I don't have to worry about just the sticker shock of the price. I've also got to think about the shipping on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, look, we've been going here for a little over 2 hours, and I was, absolutely flattered to have you folks on the stream here to join me and kind of have some fun on this day. I mean, I could go for several more hours and just talk toys with you folks and see who shows up in the chat. And but I think right now would be a good time to kind of cut it off right here. I know anyone who joined late, you'll want to check out the first 45 minutes of the stream where I talk a little bit about the history of MOTU, Transformers, and G.I. Joe, and then have a fine chat here with the gentlemen who are on screen, and just so glad to have most of you on. But where can we find each of you? Will, we'll start with you.
I'm right here. No, I'm on Instagram and I have a YouTube channel. It's just, hey, I'm just a jerk with some toys. If you want to come hang out,
minus the jerk part, but yeah.
I do. I do live streams whenever I can, and we just hang out and talk toys. It's real casual. Like I said, I'm into all kinds of things, and I just love the community. So,
Awesome.
nothing too serious with me.
Awesome.
And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Cool.
You're too modest, Will.
A bit, yeah.
I like to be a peanut gallery. You'll see me in different chats, and occasionally when kind friends invite me on camera, I'll jump on somewhere. But most of my stuff is on Instagram. It's at Jim Largo 42. So feel free to look and see some of my toys. I like to play with them. I like to do little display stuff. Toy photography is my thing.
Photography, yeah. Perfect. So that's where we'll find Jim. What about you, Ryan, Island of Misfit Toy Collectors?
You can find me at the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors, and you legends have got me to 99, so apparently I have to put out some sort of just crappy video to scare some more people away. So don't take up that 100 mark. 99 and loving it. Thank you. No, Island of Misfit Toy Collectors. Also on Instagram, it's Dreadnought Ryan. So toy photography, love taking the pictures, the dials, all that good stuff.
So you're saying this stream got you 2 more subscribers just for being on the back half. So
closer to that 100. That's scary.
Sorry, buddy. All right. Gazz, where can we find you, buddy?
That's just terrible, Ryan. I'm sorry. You can usually find me in the chat here, or you can find me on Instagram. That's about it, really.
All right.
And always a pleasure to be here as well. Thanks for the invite and talking to you, great gentlemen, great people in the community. This awesome chat.
Awesome. Well, good to hear that. TJC, take us home, buddy.
Well, basically, I'll just be in the chat and all your channels. I think that's where you find me mostly. I ain't actually got a channel or anything right now, but maybe in the future it'll be something I'll be looking at.
Sounds good.
Well, if you do, we'll be happy to come on your channel. So,
yep, just let us know what the content is, and unless completely inappropriate, we can share some videos. Happy to share your folks' content on the community tab anytime. All right. Well, this was a great stream. So next weekend, I'm unsure if it's coming out Friday or Saturday yet. The patrons will get it as early as tonight. I did a origin story of Optimus Prime as told in one of the now defunct comics. So I did a deep dive on that called A Timeless Origin Story about his war within. That'll be about an 18-minute video that'll come out next weekend. And then I'm TBD on next week's TKO topic, leaning towards Wrestling Survivor Series memories, but I got to find people who are willing to talk wrestling with me. I know there's a few here. If any of you 5 want to volunteer now for next week's TKO, or anyone in the chat wants to volunteer to be on next week's panel, speak whenever, and we'll see how that evolves. My mood might change next week as well, and I might just stop being a wrestling fan. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Okay. All right.
I was going to say, watch real quick. Watch MJF's post press conference.
I saw that.
Yes. He is gold.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Cool. Anyway, we're going to end the broadcast here. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again soon with some more of my favorite toys. Thanks again.
Thanks again.
See ya.
Thank you.